Welcome to episode 40 of Adult Music. It's number 40, Mike.
Number 40. And I am celebrating with lubricant.
Lubricant.
Yes. I'm still doing this
what are you doing
West
over there?
Cork whiskey that I had last week. I have to tell you, by the end of last week's episode, now, if listeners are still curious about this, last week I mentioned that it's a very high proof, and I might fall silent during the jazz
Not
part,
much chance
but I didn't.
of that, but you didn't.
I became more loquacious because of the liquor. I like that word, loquacious. But so I'm drinking this again. But the thing is, my eyes, by the end of last week's episode, my eyes were all like teary, and I really couldn't see anything. It was just making my eyes tear up.
What was that jerky voice? What? My eyes is going crazy. As long as your ears are all right. But we've already done the listening, as usual. So
yeah, so we don't have to listen. Well, yeah. Do we want to promote? Do a quick promotion for next week's episode?
Well, we can do that.
So
this is episode 40, plus 3 interviews. Yeah, kind of a milestone. I guess we're pushing for 50 of Adult Music, the podcasts with music for the mature mind. And next week we'll have our special Christmas music episode, which we're preparing for.
Yeah, it's going to be.
And
we'll stay with our format with new Christmas recordings. It's not going to be like recordings. Yeah, and that one we're going to do face to face in the mountain lair as we prepare to have some Christmas sausages and steaks. So yeah, we're going to be together for that one. Yeah, usually we do this on separately on Zoom, so we're not in the same room at the moment. But next week we will be.
We'll be firing up the mixer and. We'll be doing it earlier in the day, so we'll have to bring out the booze early in the day. Oh.
There will be much lubrication.
Lubricate everything up and get a Christmas episode. And then I think we'll have one more regular episode, and then we'll have our best of the year episode.
Yeah, that'll be the last episode
after
of the
Christmas.
year.
So when you're burnt out from all the Christmas music, you can check out that episode. That'll be the day after Christmas. And
26th, huh?
That will give us and the listeners a chance to go back and pick up anything that you missed from the good releases in classical and jazz this year. So all that to come before the end of the month. So
yeah, in fact, I'm still discovering new stuff from 2021. The Diapason, the French Diapason magazine, just put out their Diapason d'Ordane list. And I'm always fascinated by this. They pick around 15 albums, classical albums that they really liked, and they always have things that I've missed just because they're really peculiar to France and not really, well, they are available all over Europe, but I read a lot of the British magazines, and they don't really cover all this stuff that's happening.
Probably leave it all the French
the rest
stuff
of Europe
just because they don't like to pronounce it.
Well, I think it's a distribution issue. Speaking of which, one of my choices for next week for the Christmas episode had a distribution issue. It was actually released last December, but it didn't really make the rounds for any distributors around me until May. So I just found out about it
Bad timing,
in May.
yeah.
So I'm going to feature it on the episode. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. We'll find out next week. Yeah.
So there's a lot to come before the end of the year, and I think we're going to break 5,000 downloads too shortly. So
that's exciting as well.
That'll be good for us as our
been a good year.
Audience grows. It's been a good year, and more to come.
It's been a fantastic music listening year. It may not have been. I know a lot of people suffered from the all these lockdowns or odd kind of things. Oh, I remember you were asking me how I wanted to open this episode. I just remembered that we in Japan are living we're not locked down or anything. We're absolutely free. But you, listeners outside of Japan, are not allowed in. So I just want to say to everybody, greetings from the Hermit Kingdom of Japan. Now, what's worrying about this is they once did this for 300 years. So
I guess
they said they're going to open up in January again, but you never know. We could be here forever.
At least the rest of our years.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
The rest of our years, which I think there are less of those left than the years that have gone by. At least for me, there are. I don't know, unless I'm going to live to be 120 or something.
I don't know. Well, we'll see how many episodes we can get in that time.
Yeah, in the next 40 years or so.
Anyway, before we get rolling with the big 4-0 here, all of our listeners, everything we're going to talk about in the episode here, you'll find in the description with links to Spotify and Apple Music if you want to check out the recordings if you haven't done so already. And also in there is a link to the full episode playlist. That's all the music in one place on Deezer, our preferred streaming service. Also, you can follow us there for the playlist or listen to the podcast on Deezer as well at our username Adult Music Podcast. Now, I know we're on probably more than 30 different podcast services, and not all of them render the hyperlinks for the music links equally as well. So if you can't access anything or it shows up not so clear, just jump over to our host Podbean, where everything is easy to follow and all the links are active.
Podbean.com, that is, right?
Podbean.com, that's right.
Okay. Just type in Podbean, it'll get
just
there.
Type in Podbean.
Yeah.
If you enjoy listening to the podcast, then do follow or subscribe on whatever platform or app you listen to us on. Take a moment, give us a ranking, write a review. That'll help us get listed in the browsing category, which we've been in for the last week in Podbean and also Apple Podcasts, which is not so easy to do because there's so many music commentary podcasts out there, and there's not many doing what we do, though, so we're happy to be in there, and that's given us a boost in the downloads.
I don't think anybody's doing what we do. We're kind of
not exactly. No, yeah,
we're kind of unique. You know, they'll often, other podcasts will often interview people. They have access to a lot of these people. We don't, but we will go out and fish to try to get an interview. But they sort of a lot of people have been working in the field for a long time, so they have access to a lot of these artists. I've got a good idea for one that I told you about coming up, so hopefully we get that in the new year. Another interview. I tried to get a few this half of the year. They didn't come through, though. Nobody wanted to.
Well, they
didn't want to talk to us. We aimed kind of high, though, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, we had our award winner Gil Rose. We had Mike Ladone, and then we had the Renitsky discovery. So that was a good start for this year. And we'll have some more coming up soon, I think.
Yeah, it's amazing to me. If we weren't doing this podcast, I still wouldn't know who Renitsky is. It's really because of that, and because we talked to Bernard and
Daniel
and Marek that that I know who he is. So check out. That's our big discovery of the year, the music of Paul Renitsky. So definitely check that out on the Naxos label. That's WRAN, Renitsky. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, in addition to that, if you'd give us a comment or a like on your service. If you want to contact us directly, please feel free to do so. We'd be happy to answer any comments or questions. Our email address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com.
Yeah, write to us. We'd love to hear from you. We've gotten some nice email from people. Yeah. They're all kind of interesting. I guess people who listen to music are kind of, I don't know, they have interesting kind of comments and questions and stuff. We haven't gotten anything nasty yet. If you want to send us something nasty, go ahead. We're up for it.
Yeah, go ahead. We're both from New York. It'll only take a few minutes to send.
If you hate us, come on. You'll bring out our New York. It'll be great.
It'll only take a few minutes to send a retort back to you. Just kidding. We'll be happy to hear from you.
It depends what they say. I mean, we may very well send a retort back.
Yeah, we might. Anyway, I think we're going to go way back to begin this episode tonight. You're going to have to...
we haven't been this far back in the past yet. This is the earliest, Okay, so getting into the classical recordings, and I want to mention that I've been sitting on this album for months now because I was very intimidated, first of all, by its length. It's 4 CDs, so it's about 4 hours long. And its age, this music is from the medieval era, and it's kind of the era I know least about. I mean, there are specialists working in this era. But this is the medieval era. It's okay, well, let me just give you the album first. It's Zacara da Teramo, Complete Works.
Oh, jeez.
All right, now, his complete works. Let's say complete extant works. He may very well have written more. This is like 700 years old, this music. This is performed by La Fonte Musica and directed by Michele Pasotti, who we hear a lot of on the album because he plays all the medieval lutes, and especially on the third and fourth discs, which are more secular music. By the way, the pronunciation of the word lute, I like to say lute. I had a teacher who insisted it was lute, which is how it's often sung. And he said to me that if I didn't pronounce it the way he wanted me to, that he was going to pook. But I still say lute. I like lute better.
I like it better too.
Yeah, lute, the lute. Yeah. Anyway,
do you call people who play the lute are looters?
I guess so.
But wait a minute.
They're an unsavory group of people.
People who make guitars are called what?
Well, the guitarists. So a lute.
No,
who
make guitars.
Make guitars?
Yeah. Are they?
Oh God.
Guitariers or luthiers?
They're probably luthiers.
Yeah. So what do you call people who make lutes? Luthiers?
I guess they'd be whatever came before the lute.
Anyway, let's just call it lute and be done with it.
They'd be liarers or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, this is on the Alpha label, right?
We're joking, of course, people. Yeah, on the Alpha label, and this is quite a production, let me tell you. All right, let me tell you first of all a little bit about Zacara da Teramo. He was born between 1360 and 1364. Now, that's a long, long time ago. The Baroque era, which is kind of where the repertoire starts, although it's been pushed back into the Renaissance era with John Dowland and Josquin, which we covered this year. That's the 1500s. But this is even 200 years, 150 years before that. So before the Renaissance, before we had all this counterpoint was still being developed, really, at the time of Zacara da Teramo, and he was a member... say a member, but there was a composition kind of, they say, school and a group of composers called the Ars Nova, and he was one of them. What this is, it comes between Guillaume de Machaut, who wrote his works, the greatest composer of his era, the 1300s, and he composed in isorhythm, and isorhythm was a long kind of set of a long rhythmic pattern that would repeat, and you were locked into that pattern. You had to, all your note values had to kind of take that on. So sometimes you'd wind up with these incredibly dissonant harmonies, dissonant meaning like ear splitting in this case, not, dissonant leading to consonants. So there was that. And after him came the Ars Nova, and what they did, they started writing sort of a melody line, or maybe they would take a Gregorian chant and then they'd kind of decorate it around with a lot of melismatic vocalization, and we're going to hear a lot of that here on this album as well. The two great Ars Nova composers were Leonin and Perrotin, and they were also, like Machaut, associated with Notre Dame Cathedral. Zacara da Teramo was not, and he's kind of an interesting figure. We really don't know much about him. I hadn't even heard of him until I saw this album, and I was very curious about it. His birth name is Antonio di Berardo di Andrea, and he was nicknamed Zacara because he was small in stature. I really don't know what Zacara means in Italian. I've never heard this word before. Okay, he was born in Teramo in the Abruzzi region, so he's Italian. Okay, so he's kind of far away from the where the action is in Paris. This is where all the stuff is happening. On this album, by the way, it's called Enigma Fortuna, Zacara da Teramo Complete Works. And this comes in a box if you buy it, or you can see the cover image on your streaming site. It's got a gorgeous cover image of the Church of Santa Maria della Pietà in the right corner, and a vista of brown rolling hills giving way to mountains in the far distance. The church is in the small town of Rocca Calascio, located in the province of Aquila, Abruzzo, if you want to visit. And this is on the east coast of Italy, bordering with Lazio, which is where Rome is. This church was built in the 17th century, long after the music on this CD was written. So there you go. It's a gorgeous image, by the way. I really love the
it's pretty
cover art. This might win him one of my cover art awards of the year. And that's another thing we should do. We should pick the best cover art of the year.
We could do that, yeah. Also,
especially in classical music, because it's usually terrible, but sometimes they have good ones.
This recording doesn't sound like it was recorded in the 13th century.
It certainly does not. In fact, if it were recorded in the 13th century, we would know that aliens exist, or that time travel was possible.
It's very clear and a pleasure to listen to. The sonics, yes.
Not only that, it's not only the sonics, but the ensemble themselves. They're appropriately subdued when they do the sacred music, and then they really come alive with this almost Italianate kind of emotion when they get to the secular songs, and we'll discuss this as we go. All right, so let's go on to the music of Zacara da Teramo. If you know Renaissance era masses by somebody like Josquin, we've covered him on this show, and Palestrina and people like that. These masses on CD1, the Sacred Music disc. By the way, if you're going to stream this, you're just going to get like 100 tracks altogether. I hope they label them, but it's easy to follow everything with the booklet and the if you have a CD box of this, which I do actually. I'm kind of happy to have it. These masses here are these mass movements. We don't get an entire mass. They're more spare and coarse in their harmony, so that you don't have this like buttery sort of counterpoint that you'd normally get like in Renaissance era. They sound nice and polished and really beautiful. These are a little more, they have more of an edge to them. There are occasional dissonances on certain syllables as the harmony passes through to something more consonant, which was acceptable at the time. And also in Baroque music to an extent, too, you started to hear some of this. It makes the music interesting and unique to our contemporary ears, and I think that's part of the reason why we like listening to this music when we hear it, because it's just different. It doesn't really sound like everything else. It's really unique to itself. It's kind of leading to the Renaissance. Yeah,
when I listen to this, I think, there's different arguments about language and music that, some things that conform to a sort of universal human conception or preference, even like across cultures, a major chord sort of elicits a type of response, and so a minor chord or other sort of dissonance or consonance kind of in music. And this is kind of a period when, compared to later eras like Baroque, the so-called rules are still being worked out.
Yeah.
And so as you listen to this recording, it will, it's rather simple in terms of harmonic development, let's say, compared to Baroque music.
Exactly, yeah.
And it will follow along your preconceptions of, where harmonies should, generally go to with voice leading and resolve. But occasionally there will be a big surprise that'll make you sit up and say, exactly. Wasn't waiting for that. And that's what I really like, the little
those
sort
little
of gems
surprises. They really perk you up in your chair.
And,
I remember that too.
Didn't think they would go there. And it sounds really, in our day, it would be a kind of fresh sort of, harmonic diversion. But at that time, they probably thought of it as something very different. And, so that's what I find the appeal in this music is sort of, it goes along with the conceptions we have that were built up over the eras since that time. But how they felt about the music or what was standardized at the time is really different from anything we can relate to. And so trying to put yourself into that historical frame is really kind of fun when you listen to these.
Yeah, that is it's one of the things as a music educator. One of the most important things to, if you're teaching people about how to listen to classical music, you really have to take into account like what era you're in, like what the understanding of harmony was at that time, because it changed and grew as time went on. And here, certain things aren't worked out yet. We don't have these. We're still writing in modes here, so we don't have the whole major minor, the harmonic system that came out, especially in the classical era. And even in the Baroque era, they had that, but there weren't any hierarchies of keys that they were really building on to make these big philosophical sort of statements that Mozart and Haydn started, and then Beethoven and their Romantic era, brought to a huge level. All right, anyway, Disc 1, Sacred Music. I'm not going to go through all the tracks here, just to say that the ensemble just sings beautifully together. They're vibratoless, which wouldn't have existed there. Vibrato is really a later, the shaking of the note. You'll hear this when people sing, mostly in opera, in modern opera, but this doesn't exist at this time. And the singers follow that, that understanding. They sing in this vibratoless way. Now, I really doubt the music would have sounded like it does on this album at the time. I doubt that any singers at the time, professional as they may have been, would have had the technique that modern singers have. So it's always kind of hard to
You never know. I mean,
although they may have been great. You don't know.
They weren't listening to podcasts or playing with PlayStation or anything like that.
That's true, yeah. But by the same token, they didn't have the understanding of the voice that we now have, So it's kind of hard to kind of go back and think of how they would have sung, Anyway, it's irrelevant, because what we're getting is like our understanding, our modern scholastic understanding, scholarly understanding of what this music would have sounded like. There's a lot of cool medieval brass instruments on this this first CD of Sacred Music. We don't get a full mass ever. We get a lot of Glorias and Credos, and we get one of my favorites, Ave Maris Stella. I love the opening melody of that, and Teramo follows the Gregorian chant melody perfectly in that setting. Droning bass voices and plucked keyboard instrument on that one. It's really nice, and it's really just nice glowing music, but not at the point of the not to the level of the Renaissance. There are sackbuts, so there are instruments in these a lot of times,
yes.
And a lot of just fantastic dissonances. What I mean is dissonant. See, what dissonance means, though, if composers are listening to us, I'm using this word wrong. A dissonance is something that's going to lead to a consonance. It implies that a consonance is coming, so it's kind of part of a system. But what I mean is something that just sounds harsh to the ear, is what I want to say. Maybe I should just say that. Okay. This was an easy, pleasant listen, disc one, by the way. I think you'll really enjoy it. It's a little more sort of less, the singing is absolutely polished, but the music itself is kind of has less of a sheen to it than later Renaissance masses have. So it's kind of it's appealing to the ear this way. If you grew up listening to rock music or something like that, that kind of edge you might really enjoy that sort of edge if you know kind of what Renaissance singing sounds like. Okay, moving on to CD2, Sacred Parodies and Secular Models. Now, what this means is, okay, what is a parody? A parody mass. Oh, I hope I'm getting this right. I hope because I'm not looking this up now. But a parody mass is basically a popular song of the day, and that melody would be set to would be used to set the mass words. So imagine you're in church and you're hearing like the Gloria sung to the melody of I don't know, what's a popular song today, like some Taylor Swift song. I mean, that's basically what they're doing.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, the R&B guys were accused of taking the church music and putting the devil's lyrics to it, and this is sort of the other way around. So.
Yeah, they took, I guess, the devil's music and put the church's lyrics to it. Yeah, it got people into the pews, the church benches. Okay, so we have a lot more Glorias and Credos here. There are a few kind of secular models. We do hear a little bit of secular music on this one too. So basically the way this whole 4-CD set, this 4-hour set is that we start up in heaven and we gradually get pulled down to earth more and more as the music goes on, which I thought was a kind of a nice touch. There are a few really beautiful instrumentals on this disc too.
Yes.
There's an instrument called the clavicimbalum, which is really nice. It's kind of harpsichord-like, but I think it was earlier than that. I really have no idea what it looks like, but it has like this plucked harpsichord kind of sound to it. We also hear medieval organs and medieval lutes too. I made a lot of notes about each of these things, but let's move on. CD3, this is where the action really starts. All right, at this point, CD3 is secular music. By the way, I should also mention, on CDs 1 and 2, the ensemble keep the project interesting by changing the orchestration from track to track. Like on one track, you'll have a lute, or like a medieval lute continuo, and another one there'll be an organ, and then you'll have fiddles and lute, and it'll sort of keep changing to keep the ear engaged. Nice planning by the ensemble there. Okay, once we get to CD3, we're into secular music of the time. Now, so we're not really hearing lyrics about, the church mass, about God or anything like that anymore. We're hearing more, they're really sort of troubadour type songs, like, oh, I am, my love is causing me pain by not being here, basically. That's what every song from this era seems to be about. Or, oh, your eyes have wounded me, and now I now I feel this pain by their absence. That sort of thing comes up a lot. The first thing we hear on CD3 is it's called Cacciando per gustar and Ai cinci ai toppi, and this is a medieval technique of setting two tones at once, and they sort of work against each other. The way this used to be done was in the technique, that the isorhythm technique. They would sort of just be set to the isorhythm, and they'd sort of like interlock at certain points. It was kind of interesting. Sometimes the voices would hawk it back and forth. But this particular one, it's a real come down from all the religious stuff. It takes place in a market with people yelling out their wares and customers haggling. And the Italian singers on this, they really become actors at this point in the recording, and really up until the end. You hear a lot of the energy, the inflection of just the plain old vulgarity of everyday life at this time in these songs. There's the second track on disc 3 is Nel Cucul, which is has an imitation of a cuckoo in it, and it's cute and it's a bit vulgar. The cuckoo imitations are really cute, and the song is about trying to catch starlings. These have interesting titles. Number 3, You Can't Hide Love or a Cough. Okay. Track 4 is an instrumental. It's a song from disc 2 played on the medieval lute, so we get a sort of lovely respite from all the it's not cacophony, but sort of the energy of the first 3 tracks. And then we get a few troubadour songs. And track 7, Nuda non era, She Was Not Naked. A sound about unrequited lust on the part of the man. And it's sung by a woman. This ensemble does that quite a lot. They'll take like the man's perspective and have a woman sing it. It's kind of a nice touch. All right, and let's go ahead here to the 13th track, starting with a shawm, a very piercing sound, which is played by Marco Domenichetti on this album. The full set of voices come in to sing the text in overlapping harmony, and the text is about a man seducing a woman, and he's pretty direct. There's some odd sounds, including a percussive booming wood clap at one point. I was really wondering what that was. It was kind of just in the middle of the track. I rather like the way the rhythm came together after the clap. CD4 is more secular music, and we just go on with this. I just recommend really hearing these. I don't want to go through it like all of it. They're all a little different, but a lot of them have to do with the whole troubadour missing your love sort of thing. There's some, and again, there are a lot of variations in orchestration or instrumentation, and also vocals. Like you'll have some songs sung with sort of counterpoint, and then the next one will be like just straight chords sung by the voices, and then there'll be a solo voice, then there'll be a male solo voice after the women's solo voice, and duets. It's really beautifully programmed. In some, I like the high spirits that this Italian ensemble takes to the two secular music discs. This is a less relaxing listen than the first two discs. They sound like they're having fun, and yet they're so professional in their tonal accuracy and characterization. They make the music enjoyable, which is necessary for music this old. So, the first two discs, the more sacred music, a little more familiar, a little laid back. You can kind of relax to them, get in that holy mood. Disc 3 and 4 are really gonna kind of, they may get on your nerves a little bit, but if you kind of have a look at what the texts are about and listen to the vocalizations and the characterizations of the singers, I think you'll really enjoy it. Anyway, this is a real find, because we're not going to hear much music by this composer, I don't think, and it's one for all of you collectors out there. This is one for the library, and I think I'll go back to it occasionally. I really enjoyed this ensemble's performances, especially of the secular music. But it was all great. The sacred music was fantastic too, and the programming was great.
I like this a lot. It's a lot of music, so don't try to listen to it all at once, or by the time you get into the second disc, you'll get zoned out and.
Yeah, I would suggest one disc per day because they're so different than each other,
But, I mean, rarely will you get to hear something, this old, unless you're listening to Gregorian chant or something. And,
right.
Not many people listen to that. Although
that's all kind of samey, though.
Yeah. So there's a lot of variety here, and it's an interesting kind of picture as to how music was, developing in the eras before we normally think of as, the foundations of Western classical music. So it's interesting in that sense. And for me, I actually enjoyed Disc 1 the most. I liked that.
I liked it a lot too. It was kind of,
I liked as I said, the kind of harmonic surprises. So cohesively, that one was my favorite. 2 and 3, I thought the vocal works had a lot of kind of overly similar character in them, not being able to understand a
lot of times you couldn't
lyrics.
Understand the situations either that the lyrics were presenting.
That said, I did like, as you said, the programming and the sort of interspersed instrumental numbers was refreshing, and I did like the instrumental works on all of the discs, and there's a lot of variety there too. So just when you thought, oh, okay, these vocals are kind of similar to the last one, there'll be an instrumental track that will sort of cleanse your palate, so to speak, and make you ready for something new. You want to split this up, but it's a pretty interesting listen, and there's some kind of diversions in harmony and compositional direction that you won't expect, and so you try to transport yourself through time, put yourself in another place, and there's still enough to hold on to that's familiar to our ears, in this time and age we live in now. So that's kind of endearing and makes this an interesting listen. So yeah, check it out. It's unique.
One of the things I learned a little bit of I got a little bit of historical feeling from listening to this disc too. The secular music, it's a bit the the feelings people put across. They're a little old-fashioned these days. I mean, we still have a residue of them, and this whole troubadour romantic feeling in our own societies, but not as much as they did. It was just the way they lived. So it does feel a little bit old, and you feel like you're being deposited into this kind of like world that is just gone now, and you're trying to work out how it works. But in the sacred works, we're still, this is the thing about religion, is it ties us to the distant past, and so you're still hearing settings of these same words today, and we have that in common with the past. And that's really I feel like one of the values of religion, and we these days we tend to be throwing it away, and I think it's really valuable for that, tying us to the past and to the people who were, in the same religion as we were way back then. So I got that bit of a sense of that from the first two discs as well. Okay, I just wanted to say that. Anyway, religion lasts. Behavior patterns tend to change. rather more rapidly now than ever before. All right, on to our second album in the classical of my classical choices this year. This is a pianist I really love, Italian pianist Beatrice Rana. So I have two Italians today. How about that? That was not intentional. Okay, Beatrice Rana, and she's playing Chopin on this one, so a big favorite of a lot of classical music fans, especially piano fans. She plays 12 Études, Opus 25. That is the second set of Études that Chopin composed. There's also an Opus 10 set that's probably more famous. Some of these are famous too. And then she plays the 4 Scherzi, also, Scherzo 1 through 4. I don't spend a lot of time listening to recordings of Chopin's music, even though I love it, because I played the piano when I was younger. I never went to school for it, but I took private lessons and all that. And of course, I played and muddled through a lot of... I played some of Chopin's shorter works and muddled through some of the longer ones. And they're very, very familiar to me. So I kind of feel like I do with, like, say, like Beatles recordings. I'm sort of like, oh, I've heard these so many times, or, I just don't want to hear it again. But I love this pianist, and I really had to hear this set. And I hadn't heard any of these works in a while, the 12 Études or these Scherzi. By the way, my personal favorite recording of the 4 Scherzi, or Scherzos, if you want to say it that way, is by Stephen Hough, my favorite pianist. And that is still the case, but we'll get to that. This recording made me happy to hear them all again. Okay. I think hearing all these Chopin, like, Études, like, I played, like, 2 of these, and, they kind of, it's weird when I hear, like, them being played, it brings back memories of me playing them, and that's sort of an extra dimension that kind of makes it harder for me to be a critic or to talk about the works. The very first one is a good example. Number 1 in A flat. This is the harp one. It's sort of like a wrist exercise. You're kind of like, you're playing this melody, and the wrists are moving to play all the arpeggios. That kind of sounds like an arpeggiated harp, sort of. So Beatrice Rana, we hear right away, is an amazing technician. I already knew this from her previous recordings. This piece comes across as very musical despite the technique required. The melody is very clear, and it's played very romantically. There's a bit of rubato in there, and the expression is so gentle that you don't realize how difficult this is to play. All the Études are pretty difficult. Some are harder than others, but there you go. Then we go to number 2 in F minor. This has fleet, scale, and arpeggio figures, and Rana brings out the musicality of a piece that can sound like an exercise in some hands, like mine, although I never played this one. She has fluctuating dynamics, too. This is another thing she does throughout these Études. Like, she'll kind of sort of crescendo and decrescendo very gently. It's sort of a nice way of kind of emphasizing that this is music and not just an exercise. This is a beautiful and gentle performance of number 2, Opus 25. Number 3 in F major sounds like a horse galloping rhythm, and it's captivating in Rana's hands. Number 4 in A minor, alternating hands playing chords. Rana accentuates the right hand and allows the left to be an echo or a springboard. It's a nice effect, especially given the technique that's required to play these. It's hard to get expression out of something this difficult. There are much more difficult piano pieces than these, I'm aware, but this is what started all that. Okay, Etude number 5 in E minor. This one kind of galumps in the... I actually played this one too. This is the other one I played. This one galumps in the outer sections and has a gorgeous middle section with figuration in the right hand. And the melodies in the bass. It kind of reminds me of the Fantasy Impromptu. And if you live in Japan like we do, like every Japanese girl who's a piano student has played that piece. I've heard it a million times here.
Does that mean you know a million girls? Or?
I think I might know a million girls. Me and Elvis both. Okay. But this one's kind of similar to that one. She takes a long pause before the beautiful middle section, as if to separate the kind of like more kind of, I don't want to say ugly, but it's not ugly. It's kind of like just sort of lumpy, the beginning and the end, and then the middle section is kind of like, it really is like the cream in the middle of the Oreo cookie instead of it's really nice. She shapes this with a lot of rubato and plays in the romantic style. The melody comes across well, but there are other interpretations that I prefer. She plays with a lot of rubato in this one. I liked it. I'm not going to complain about it. It's amazing technique, of course, and she's very, very expressive. It's almost like, yeah, she's Italian. Italians, sort of like the French, have this sense of like, color of the instruments. Italians have this innate sense of melody, and they're really fantastic at playing these legato melodies, and she's a good example of that. Number 6, in G sharp minor. This one she goes into without a pause from the previous one, another sort of unusual interpretational move. This one has fierce trills in the right hand, and they dissipate into figuration that runs up the piano. There's not much melody in this. The musical interest is in the left hand, but you wind up listening to the amazing figuration, which actually in this case is louder than she plays. She really accentuates the figuration in this one. Number 7 in C sharp minor. This is a slow and somber etude. The melody's in the bass. It gains in drama towards the middle with a busy left hand, playing, again, furious scales. I think I like that word. The piece quietens again, barely audible at times. She uses a wide dynamic range. She can play very quietly without losing the quality of her tone. Again, that's pretty amazing too. I think this one's more of a study on touching the keys. It's not quite a toccata, but it's kind of like on weight and the weight you give to the keys. Number 8 is in D flat, and this one has a familiar Chopin figuration. It has alternating thirds as the chief difficulty. That was always something I could never get. There's something about the bones of the hand. I don't know how pianists do it. Maybe one day someone will explain it to me. I can never get thirds. Number 9 in G flat, staccato touch in this one. Sounds a bit circusy and cheerful in Rana's hands. And it's always beautiful to judge balance between the hands and overall volume. Number 10 in B minor, dramatic opening that I've heard played with more fire than here. She's not really going for like real unbridled passion in this particular work. She really can't help bringing out the melodic elements in even the most technical pieces. And this piece has a quiet middle section. I think it uses sixths. I'm not really sure. I didn't get my score out. The first section comes back at the end, so this is like a ABA sort of form. And she gets the appropriate passion and fire, but it's not as extreme as some I've heard, and maybe that's a good thing. I can't really say. And her sense of melody really triumphs in this piece. Number 11 in A minor starts like a church work with chords and then goes into a ferocious right-hand figuration with a theme in the left hand. Again, the fluctuating dynamics, she makes the work musical and intriguing. And finally, the last etude is number 12 in C minor, and this starts ferociously. The bass notes are the theme, and the right hand plays fleet figuration. It's all fantastic playing. The fire is there. And she can't not make this piece sound melodic, which is welcome. So she's a very musical player, and I really enjoyed that. Now, to be honest, when I go through like 12 Chopin etudes, they're all kind of exercises showing technique. And it's kind of a lot of the same thing. But she made this pretty interesting. I did enjoy these. There was a lot of... There were a lot of sort of, like I said, crescendo, decrescendo, sort of rubato playing, meaning like kind of stretching out the rhythm a bit, before new chords come. And she made them interesting. Now, the next 4 pieces, the 4 Scherzi, or scherzos, if you prefer, are more sort of, musical isn't the word, but they're more expressive, let's say, than the etudes. They're really just sort of big pieces. And let's talk about these. Scherzo number 1 in B minor. And this is some music with some variety in it now. This scherzo starts out with fleet figuration. Rana plays it clearly and very fast. I've always heard something a bit demented in the opening section of this work, and I hear it again here. Maybe it's the insistent bass note that's repeated after the runs. and the constant stops and pauses. It kind of sounds, there's something like a little unhinged about the opening of this. It's not an easy work to put across. And again, now I'm going to my Stephen Huff recording of this. These 4 works Stephen Huff also recorded, and I like his recordings a lot. And I really prefer him, although I do like Beatrice Rana in this too. She's a pianist who has her own way of playing things. I guess all pianists do, but she's got something really unique about her. So she's always going to make it hers. I'm going to say something a little bit about that at the end. There's a lyrical section that acts as the work's middle section, and it sounds like she's using a mute on this, like the una corda pedal, but I can't really tell. And the opening section repeats at the end. Scherzo number 2 is a big favorite among pianists. A lot of piano students play this one. This is in B-flat minor, opus 31. This has the caressing, like arpeggiated chords followed by this outburst of octaves. And it's really hard to kind of judge the, it's kind of hard to know how to interpret that. In this, Rana interprets this by making the opening arpeggiated chords sound kind of like a hiccup, and she plays them pretty quickly. It's hard to get the balance of this. I liked her approach here, but I of course I would, because I like her. It's hard to know how to judge this piece, but she made some good decisions on note lengths and silences. There's a lot of silence. There are a lot of pauses in this piece. The melodic parts are quiet, yet fully audible over the quiet bed of figuration laid down by the left hand. In the repeat of the opening material, there are some interpretational differences, always a sign of a probing mind at work, meaning from differences from other performances I've heard. They all keep the ear and mind engaged. The middle section is played very quietly. I actually had to turn this up. It was like leaning into it. I had Rana make sure that the similarities with the opening material register, and she plays the figuration with the melody and the bass very fast. People have their preferences in works as often played as these, and I thought the bass melody was too fast, personally, although it loses none of its profile and appeal in Rana's hands. She's expressive throughout. In fact, I thought the ending was too much on the fast side, although it's all very exciting. And that's, I guess, what counts. Scherzo number 3, very quickly. This is the shortest of the scherzi at 8 minutes, and Rana navigates the changing moods well. This one has the gorgeous section where fragments of melody are interrupted by figuration raining down in the right hand. You may have heard this. Difficult to play. Scherzo number 4, the last work on the disc, in E major, opus 54. This has a lot of mood changes, and Rana excels at these. It's an element of her playing that I've come to appreciate, particularly in these 4 scherzi. The quieter slow section starts at 4 minutes in, and again, she's very quiet here, while allowing the melody to fully register. It sounds like she's going for something hypnotic. The melody in the slow section is played very slowly and tentatively when resumed after a change of material in the work's center. And we get a repeat of the opening material, a slight coda, and then we're done. Okay, you might have noticed by the things I was saying that she kind of takes this sort of unique approach. And the problem, well, it's not a problem. The problem is this music has been played so many times by like so many pianists, and it's not open to all that much interpretation. Unlike, say, Bach's music, which is it has as many interpretations to it as players, because you can really do almost anything you want. So I feel kind of odd. With music like this, there's a certain way I like to hear it played, and it's not, she plays it that way a little bit, but not completely. I liked her individuality in this. I like the program with the technical pieces contrasting with the more varied scherzi, which it was a nice idea to separate this program in half that way. Rana plays these very well throughout. I'm still going to turn to Stephen Huff for the Scherzi though. And I enjoyed this a lot, and I'll listen to it more. I feel like I didn't really get everything that was coming across. I've only heard it twice. So I'm going to have to hear this again, I think. But with Chopin's music, this I kind of have this. It's hard to let go of the way I want it to sound. So I wouldn't say this is my favorite performance of these. I like the Stephen Huff Scherzi better. The Études, I don't really have a favorite, so I'll take these. This is great. I liked her playing of the Scherzi as well, though. So this is a recommended, but it might surprise you a little bit if you like your Chopin a certain way.
It's definitely worth a listen. I enjoyed her playing a lot. She has a masterful technique for her
fantastic.
Young age. I also noticed that she paid a lot of attention to drawing out the dynamic contrasts.
Yes.
And
a little too much, I thought, though. I don't know.
Could be a bit much in terms of the overall arc of things. There's, some of these have amazing changes in tempo and things going on in them, but she holds it together really well. Especially, I thought, number 13 track. So the first Scherzo, number 1 in B minor. This one has like a lot of changes, and the tempo changes and things, and the rapid playing doesn't phase her at all. She comes through those, without sort of, how can I say, affecting what comes next. She's always like ready for what's coming on.
She can do those split-second changes of mood too. She really makes them register.
So technique is flawless in the way she plays. I just, like you say, if you were going to compare it to Stephen Huff, she doesn't have the overall sense of polish.
Okay, I know what you mean by that.
You know what I'm saying? When you just listen to the overall performance like that. But I do admire her passion. She really digs in the right places where I felt like, in the these kind of pieces, there's in Chopin in general, there's places where there's just a lot of emotional excitement. She really draws that out really well, and there's no fault in her technique, and the tempos are impressive. Just maybe kind of total refinement compared to someone like Huff, but she's very young. And
also, she is a refined player, but she's just
certainly,
after something else, I think, is what it comes down to. But I really do prefer that sort of passionate refinement. It's sort of like a weird balance. And I think Stephen Huff gets that. I think he's really excellent at this music.
Yeah. So, I mean, like you say, I don't want to be too critical of that because these are so, so often recorded works. As you say,
that's really my big issue with them is that because every pianist there is plays them.
All piano players knows them. But I was really impressed with her technique and her passion. And I don't know. I haven't listened to a lot of her other recordings, so I don't know like what her main thing is.
I know you and I are big fans of the second Prokofiev piano concerto, and she played that. And it's really great. Although I do prefer Bavouzet in that, but she's really great in it as well.
Yeah, Bavouzet really made that one come alive to me.
For me too, yeah. I didn't really pay attention to it before I heard that Bavouzet recording.
So I'll listen to her recording of that. I mean, I think...
worth hearing. Yeah.
I think she has all the technical abilities and the real passion. And so, I mean, it's not fair to compare her to, more seasoned and older players on the same material, but I would say since she shows a lot of real promise, and I'd like to hear what she does in the future from here.
She's someone I'm definitely tracking and have been already. She's already played some really big works, like she recorded the Goldberg Variations, which I think at her young age might be a little too early for that, but I mean she did them really well. But it'll be interesting to hear. I'm sure she'll record them again 20-25 years down the road. If I'm still alive and still maybe I'll be able to hear those.
You'll be around.
20 years from now? Yeah, most likely, let's say, unless we
might need hearing aids by then, but we'll be around.
Well, that won't be fun.
What?
I was talking to this woman about how I told her how I wanted to live to be 100, and she said to me something. She really surprised me. Like, what kind of 100 do you want to be? like, you don't want to be losing your eyesight or your ears or having your faculties go, you know? And I'm like, yeah, that's right. I mean, just to be 100, just to be this guy sitting in a chair. I mean, if my eyes and ears hold up, it'll be fantastic because I love music and I love kind of, you know, movies, reading books, things like that. So, yeah, I certainly hope these things last.
What kind of 100? I can think of a few adjectives, but I don't want to lose our clean rating on the podcast, so I'll just lascivious. Does that pass the test?
I don't know that that's necessary at that age. I think you know, I think just seeing the sunrise is an exciting thing once you reach there. You know, kind of. Yeah. You know, because you're counting days as opposed to years. I think by that point, if you're 100.
As long as we'll get back more out of the system than we paid into it.
If anyone listening is 100 years old, write to us and let us know.
That's right. We'll dedicate it. We'll dedicate something to you.
Yeah. All right. Now, the last and probably most exciting recording that we did, although I don't know, the Teramo was kind of, you know, this is a big release, let's say. But I thought this was the most exciting recording that we heard this week. This is Stephen Isserlis, British solo cello music on the Hyperion label. Oh, by the way, did I mention that? I keep forgetting this. Beatrice Rana, Chopin, was on the Warner Classics label.
Right, and we should say with this one, you won't find this one in the playlist or links for it because Hyperion does not allow their music to be streamed. But you can check out the samples on their own webpage, and also I'll put up the Presto music link for it, but you won't get the complete tracks on streaming.
I don't want to say that's a real shame that they don't put this on streaming because this music, Hyperion is one of the better. Well, there are a lot of great labels out there, but they're one of my favorite labels. They have a lot of my favorite pianists on this label, and people just can't hear it. You can only hear samples. You have to buy the recording to hear it. I hope they kind of work something out. You know, they're a small label and they do deserve to be recompensed for the great music that they release. But I really hope that this music is available. I want everybody to hear it because I think it's great. Anyway, Stephen Isserlis, he's a cellist, British solo cello music. He's one of the best cellists in the world, and he's definitely my favorite. So up there with Stephen Huff on the piano. They often appear together. Another thing about Isserlis is that he's an excellent writer on classical music as well. And he wrote the very illuminating booklet notes, which you can read on the Hyperion website, by the way, as well as the CD if you buy it. I actually absolutely recommend you do that. He's really engaging. He's got a lot of great stories to tell as well. I'm going to be referring to those booklet notes quite often in what I'm going to say about this. So if it sounds familiar, please forgive me. Because he knows a lot more about this music than I do, obviously. All right. So we start. It's solo cello music, as has been so often the case in the last 2 years. This project was the result of the lockdown. Okay, he started, there was Mr. Isserlis in his house or apartment, wherever he lives, looking at some old scores for solo cello. And the way this program seems to go is from heavy to light. He really starts with some pretty heavy works, and then midway through, it just sort of like goes into something a little more lighter and more Baroque sounding. We'll get to that in a moment. Let's start with the heavy. The first two works. First of all, we got a little introductory piece by Benjamin Britten called Thema Sacher, from 1976, the year of Britten's death. This was written for Paul Sacher's birthday. Paul Sacher was a Sacher? Sacher? I don't know how to say it. I hope I'm saying it right. I think it's a German pronunciation. Sacher was a Swiss conductor and also a great patron of 20th century music and composers. And he commissioned many of the 20th century's greatest works. This particular piece of Britten's was written at Heinz Holliger's suggestion. He got the cellist, Mstislav Rostropovich, the Russian cellist, to get various composers to provide Sacher with a special gift. And some of the composers that acquiesced were Dutilleux, Ludoslavsky, Holliger himself, who plays the recorder, Henze, Berriot, Pierre Boulez, oh boy, and Benjamin Britten. And by this time, Britten was too frail to compose a whole set of variations, so he wrote just this theme as a basis for other composers. Sort of like Verdi did with the Requiem. He composed one movement, and he wanted the other composers to compose the other movements, and I think they did, but Verdi wound up writing an entire Requiem by himself. In this case, the other composers didn't follow through, so we only have the theme.
I wouldn't be happy if I received this one myself, but
it was kind of a hard one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not only but it's for this guy's birthday, whatever,
Guess.
The theme itself starts with powerful statements, then gets into some throaty sawing on the cello. It feels very fragmentary to me. Isserlis' tone has a lot of presence. He especially gets the bass notes to bite. It's a pretty powerful thing, and it's a really powerful piece, and we really get a sense of just how great Isserlis is. He's got this gigantic presence and tone when he plays. And if you ever hear him speak, though, he's very kind of like humble. He's like sort of the opposite of his playing in person. It's kind of funny. Maybe not the opposite, but he's a lot more understated than his tremendous tone is. I really I love his playing. The next piece is probably the biggest piece on this album. Benjamin Britten's Cello Suite No. 3, Opus 87, composed in 1971. This was written for his friend, the cellist Mstislav Rostropovich. And the suite is based on 4 Russian themes which range in mood from poignant to tragic. This is a pretty dark work. Rostropovich rather lived all of those moods, from poignant to tragic, after the work was completed and before he finally gave the premiere 3 years later in 1974, through really no fault of his own, or depending on how you think about it. In 1970, Rostropovich had written an open letter protesting the Soviet authorities' treatment of the writer Alexander Solzhenitsyn. You might remember him. I remember having to read his One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich when I was in high school. Can you believe it? Anyway, as a result of this open letter, Rostropovich himself fell into disgrace with the authorities. He was allowed to perform in the Soviet Union, but not abroad, and was, of course, humiliated at every opportunity. The final humiliation was to dismiss him and force him into exile, which to me sounds like a good thing. I don't know, given this regime, which gave Rostropovich the opportunity to premiere the work at the Aldeburgh Festival in England in 1974. Critics have said that this suite is a reflection of Rostropovich's dangerous situation, which Isserlis says may be partly true, but Isserlis thinks that the entire work is more a universal meditation on death, and I agree with him, actually. The 4 themes used in this are the Kontakion, from the Orthodox Mass for the Dead, so the Russian Church. The other 3 themes come from folk song arrangements made by Tchaikovsky, and all are concerned with mortality, so that's pretty much a good clue as to what this work is about. The other 3 works are Mournful Song, Under the Little Apple Tree, Street Song, The Gray Eagle, and both of these works feature grieving lovers. And the last work, Autumn, speaks of fallen leaves in the cold wind, and it's pretty depressing. Tchaikovsky set this one for children's voices, Autumn, but we're going to hear, well, we'll get to that soon. Okay, this work is in, one of the things that makes this work a little difficult too, although it has a great effect, it's in reverse variation form. That means we hear all the variations on the themes before we hear the actual themes themselves at the end. So you're really not aware that, unless you've read about the piece beforehand, that these works are based on these themes from these Russian folk songs until you actually hear them at the very end of the piece. And it has a big effect. Okay, I'm going to include a lot of Isserlis's comments on this because he's so good in the booklet about this. Okay, the first movement is Introduzione. It starts with the lowest note on the cello played pizzicato, so it's an open C. We hear it repeated throughout the introduction, and it underpins a melodic line derived from the Orthodox chant called Kontakion, an Orthodox chant for the dead, which is known as Grant Repose Together with the Saints in English. It's in the English hymnal under that name. Okay, again, this is reverse variations form. We don't hear the theme in its original form until the very last movement. Isserlis remarks that in Britten's suite, it sounds like one priest and then two are intoning a prayer for the departed, to the accompaniment of funeral bells, which is the repeating bass note. The theme is indeed sad and melodically prayerful, like melisma. Next we come to the Marcha Allegro. This is based on the folk song The Grey Eagle. And it contrasts with the chant. This uses a rhythm that sends the bow skittering across a string. And the theme sounds very abstract here. It's a gorgeous full recording, and the presence that Isserlis achieves is impressive. He sounds gigantic on this recording, and there are quiet passages in the upper register separating the lower strings. This leads into the canto, based on the folk song Under the Little Apple Tree. Isserlis comments that this sounds like gentle sighs. I heard it is very quietly played until the end, and it crescendos into a bit of passion and then recedes again. I guess the sighs analogy is quite good. And then we get to a Barcarola. A Barcarola is kind of a Venetian boat song. It's in 6/8, and it has those kind of like this up and down kind of wave sort of feeling to it. This is based on the folk song Autumn, and it sounds a bit like a tribute to Bach's first cello suite, if Bach's cello suite were on the waves in Venice. The famous first movement prelude, the first movement prelude of the first cello suite, it has a boat rocking on the waves feeling to it. The melody is in the highest notes, and it suddenly speeds up at the end and becomes dramatic, and then suddenly quiets for the dialogo. Okay, at this point, we've heard variations on all four of the folk songs used in this piece. But now in the dialogo, it's going to get more complicated. The dialogo combines aggressive fragments from The Grey Eagle and calm pizzicato answers stemming from Grant Repose. This is the church theme for the Mass from the Dead. Isserlis thinks this dialogue was suggested by Mussorgsky's Samuel Goldberg and Schmoyle movement from Pictures of an Exhibition. I don't really know about that. Halfway through, it is as if the first voice resigns itself to the inescapable reality of death. It starts with angry protests, then the rhythmic patterns fade into soft floating down to earth. A crescendo on one note leads to the fuga, which is a fugue, based on Autumn, the folk song Autumn. This sounds like a pretty loose fugue to me. The themes repeating and other voices are at great distances away, so it's not really a very formal fugue. It doesn't have the profile of a fugue, but it comes across powerfully. Next, recitativo, which is kind of a spoken section, so the cello is going to imitate like a spoken voice. This one has disjointed splinters of musical material, sounded briefly before flitting away into the shadows. Those are all Isserlis's words from the booklet, by the way. Splinters is a good word. The lines fly off into the darkness. At the end, we hear some harmonics. This gains energy in the last 10 seconds and leads to the moto perpetuo movement. This is Isserlis writing. Eerie atmosphere carries over to this movement, which reminds Isserlis of the last movement of Chopin's Wind Howling Through the Graves, fourth movement of his second piano sonata. So if anybody knows that work, this is a little similar to that. I myself hear the resemblance, especially at the beginning. Next comes a Passacaglia. This is the most substantial movement. It's a set of variations over a repeating bass, although I couldn't follow the repeating bass. I think it's just outlined. The theme is from Grant Repose, or the Kontakion again. Its cold purpose is stated in the lower reaches of the cello, while the upper voice weeps and pleads in falling semitones. Okay, credit where credit is due. Those are Isserlis's words. Intensity develops. The upper voice lets forth a melodious cry of anguish. Then we hear the four themes themselves afterwards. Now, this is kind of a magical moment. Once we hear the say cry of anguish in the upper voice, we get to the actual folk songs themselves, unadorned with any variations. And there's such a simplicity and such a Russianness to them that we feel sort of released from all this weight that we got from the work up to this point so far. It's a magical moment. So if you can follow all that went before, you're really in for a real treat here if you don't know this work. We first hear the mournful song Under the Little Apple Tree, a very lyrical and mournful melody. It's almost like we're hearing the actual form that all the shadows that came before it, the illusion, was based on. So now you're getting sort of the reality in a way. That's the way I felt. It's like the shock of reality or some truth is being revealed to us in these next four movements. The next comes Autumn, very Russian sounding in its heaviness and insistence on falling on the beats. The accents come on the first syllable, sort of like in the Russian language. The street song, The Gray Eagle, very brief, rather nonchalant song. And then we get the big section for the Mass from the Dead, Grant repose together with the saints. This ends on the cello's lowest, darkest note, C major, as it began. We're back at the beginning again. It's heavy sounding, mostly played in the lower register of the cello, and it moves to the upper register after the first statement and sounds more plaintive when it gets up there. Anyway, beautiful, very powerful work, worth getting to know if you've never heard it before. Tracks 15 through 18 present the... tracks 15 through 17 present the folk songs used in the cello suite as Tchaikovsky set them. So we hear this with the piano accompaniment. The pianist is Mishka Rushdie Momen on this, and the presence of the piano is helpful here because it separates these works from the suite, and also we hear the harmony now. We're not hearing the cello's suggestion of the harmony only. Next comes Autumn, and Street Song is next, and then we get the Kontakion. This one is a multi-track version of the Grant Repose melody in the adaptation used by Britten in the suite, which he found in the English hymnal. It's pretty long at 4 minutes and 31 seconds. So Isserlis multi-tracked himself for this. It sounds like a passionate Russian church piece here with Isserlis imitating choir voices in his performance. Okay, at this point, we're turning around to something a little lighter. First, we get William Walton, Theme for a Prince. This was written for Prince Charles's 21st birthday, way back in 1969. Can you imagine Prince Charles is 21 years old? Jeez, I feel like he was born 60. Anyway, Walton, I guess, I don't know. I was only 4 years old then, so what do I know? Anyway, Walton seems to have intended this melody to be material for sets of variations by other composers. But again, they didn't take up the offer. So we just have this theme. Isserlis, by the way, did commission a work by Robert Saxton based on this theme, and Saxton came through. It's called Sonata on a Theme of William Walton, and Isserlis recommends that you hear it. I haven't heard it. Maybe I'll give it a listen one day. It's pretty brief, this theme, at 1 minute 28 seconds. Prince Charles's preferred instruments are apparently the cello and the trumpet. Oh, you can get a royal audience one day, Russ.
Oh, right.
All right.
Just don't learn how to play the cello.
You're going to play the cello?
Yeah.
This piece is lyrical and a bit dark. Next, we get William Walton's Passacaglia. Again, Passacaglia is a set of variations over a repeating bass line. We don't really hear the repeating bass line in this. I think it might just be outlined. I actually found this a little hard to follow. This is a theme with 9 variations. The first 6 grow in intensity. The 7th is more lyrical, and then the energy resumes and momentum builds to the end. I thought the actual bass line was sort of hard to remember. When you read the word Passacaglia, you just have to assume it's there, I guess. I don't think the composer is lying to you. Yeah, I think I missed the handoff to the first variation in this. I did catch the calm 7th variation around the 4 minute and 30 second mark. and then it gets more aggressive to the end. This work has a lot of electricity, at least in this performance, and especially towards the end. It ends with a double-stopped pizzicato, which I thought was kind of cool. The next work is really odd. We're getting into the lighter part of the program here, by John Gardner, lived 1917 to 2011. This is called Carranto Pizzato. And Walton's Passacaglia is a good springboard for the rest of the program, because the Passacaglia really is a Baroque era sort of form. The Passacaglia recalls past eras as imagined by the 20th century. This particular work by John Gardner, the Carranto Pizzato, is inspired by Elizabethan lute music, or lute, as my inattentive teacher said. So this is the Renaissance era before the Baroque, so John Dowland's era, we could say. Okay. This was the central movement of Gardner's Partita for solo cello, opus 98, composed in 1968. So it's only one movement of a bigger work. It's all pizzicato. This is crazy. It sounds really hard to play, but it is engaging. It's really interesting. It's got a pretty opening, and it's impressive that we're getting a melodic line out of this continued technique. I mean, he's playing all pizzicato in the bass and the accompaniment. And he's got a bass line and a melodic line going at the same time. There is a lute quality to this, and this piece really sounded hard to perform to me. And yet it's kind of a light piece. Okay, the other major piece on this album is this piece by Frank Merrick in its first ever recording on a professional label. Its first ever professional recording, let's say. I think Isserlis in the booklet note mentions that he recorded it before in his own sort of setup, but that recording has been lost. He says probably a good thing, because he was very young when he made it. I'm sure he was great then too. Anyway, this is called Suite in the 18th Century Style. We don't have a composition date for this work because Merrick didn't remember writing it. Boy. He was a bit of an eccentric, according to Isserlis' notes. We do know it was written before 1935, though, because the title page says that the finger positions, were noted down in the score, and the score was edited by the cellist W.E. Whitehouse, and he died in 1935, so it had to be written before that, or that year. The movements ranged from cheeky to poignant in tone, so it's kind of like the other end of like what Britten was writing in. They meet at poignant. So this is a lighter work. I guess it sort of balances the darkness of the Britten work out. This is a piece about life, about dance, and things like that. So it's a nice counterbalance. Let me see here. Let's get into the piece. It starts with a rather long ritornello. A ritornello in Baroque era is a theme, and then it goes off to something else and comes back. It's sort of like a rondo in a way, but the main kind of theme keeps coming back is the main point, and that's what happens here. This starts out like the first Bach solo violin sonata, if you know, with that big double-stopped like bass notes, and then like the melody is on top of that. And in this piece we get various episodes framed by the opening. This movement lasts a long time at 7 minutes and 43 seconds. It sounds pretty demanding for like one person to play all of this. I thought to myself, though, one of the reassuring things about Baroque music is the constant return to the tonic chord. And we never stay on it long in Baroque music, though. I think that's why 20th century composers looked back to this style so often. Okay, I think it's just a reassuring style in a time that was very not reassuring, as is the time we're living in now. So, again, I recommend to listeners, go back to the Baroque. It's very reassuring. Next movement is a courant. These are all dance names now at this point. The courant has a nice bounce to it. It's kind of a buoyant sounding. This work may as well be called the Suite in the Bach style. He called it Suite in the Baroque style, Merrick, but I think it's really taking after Bach in this case. It doesn't sound like him, but it just kind of it brings him to mind, shall we say. Next, Sarabande, slow dance. This has a gravitas despite the light touch Isserlis is using, or maybe even because of it. It's got a very appealing melody, and there's a real teardrop in Isserlis's light touch in the quieter sections. Listen for that. This movement is very touching. All these movements are around 4 minutes long, and they're noticeably longer than the Baroque works they're emulating. This work seemed to go on for a long time, although I did enjoy it. Okay, next we have Borets One and Two. This has a strutting theme in the middle section, and it goes into something more pastoral in the middle, with the pedal point bass sounding like a musette. A musette is kind of like a French bagpipe. It's a lot lighter sounding than a Scottish bagpipe, and it really recalls the countryside when you hear it. It's like a continuing bass line. This sounds like a country dance. Next week comes a Siciliano. Siciliano rhythm is unmistakable at the opening. Bum 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 bum. It's like the third and the first beat of a 3. This has a pretty standard melody, and the melody develops in a very pretty, appealing lilt as it goes into its climax. I really enjoyed that. This goes on for quite a while, though. It's 6 minutes and 8 seconds. The composer is clearly writing this for himself and not thinking of any audience. I think he's really enjoying himself. It is good, though, but it goes on for a really long time. Next come the Borets One and Two, similar in profile to the gavottes. The B sections of this movement have long, winding scalar figures. Borets 2 is, in fact, entirely scalar figures. Next, we have an air, very brief, at 56 seconds. It's a melody with the harmony filled out in the lower register a little bit. Makes its poignant point very quickly. It's well-shaped, and it just stops with no repeat. I mean, you expect a repeat, but we don't get that. And it feels odd for that reason. Last, we get the traditional ending to a Baroque suite, the Gigue. This has a dancey Gigue rhythm, of course, with all sorts of leaps from the lower to the upper register. Very impressive playing by Isserlis on this, and the rhythm is infectious, as Gigue rhythms tend to be. I think it's longer than it needs to be, really. I think this whole suite has maybe too many movements, but I liked it. I thought it was all of them are enjoyable. It's just I thought it was just a little longer than it needed to be. It's all very appealing, though. Finally, we end with a contemporary composer, Thomas Addis, and this work is called Sola, written in the year 2000. Technically, it's a 21st century work, unless you count 2001 as being the beginning of the 21st century. So maybe the title of the album isn't really correct. Anyway, this is a pretty... it's only 2 minutes long, this work, and it was written in a single night. Addis once described himself as a Baroque composer living in the 21st century. Interesting. So I guess this fits the program. I wish there were more of those kind of composers, really. The inspiration for this work is rather funny. Addis's cellist friend, Zoya Martlu, had told him she couldn't spend the evening with him as planned because she had to practice. So off she went to practice, and Addis wrote this piece while she was practicing. And
that's all those drooping notes in there. That's where they come from.
Well, yeah, the scales are her practicing. You hear actual scale notes. It's a series of chords representing his reproving voice, failing to stop the cellist from playing her scales. The dispute is finally resolved in the form of a pizzicato C major cadence. He wrote this score in a night and sent it to her via fax the same night that she was practicing. And it must have been quite a surprise for her. It's kind of, it sounds like a very British thing to do, really. Okay, I found the chords in this. He claims that he's like a Baroque composer living in the 21st century. The chords, in fact, are almost Bachian. I guess that's him because it does sound sort of Baroque. And we hear the slow upward practice scales. They're harmonized later. It's a cute work. It's not a masterwork. I mean, Addis has written masterworks. He's a pretty great composer. The lower register and chords sound pretty angry. And the double stop scale starts sounding rather sad and apologetic towards the end. So I guess he gets his way. I think of, in the end, I guess the artist always kind of in his art kind of fixes what's not working out in real life. Anyway, this whole album was pretty fantastic. If you like the cello, it's really a must-hear. And then, even if you're not a big fan of British music, I happen to like it. I think you still need to hear this. I thought this was a fantastic recording. It's probably my favorite one of the three that I've talked about today.
Yeah, for me, cello is my favorite string instrument, and I really like Isserlis as one of my favorite. Lynn Harrow, Isserlis, a few other cellists who I really like. However, this recording, I didn't really care for the Britten pieces.
Oh, really?
Just because...
Well, they are heavy, yeah.
Well, the thing I like about Isserlis is his tone. I mean, that's what I like about cello. That's why it's my favorite instrument, because it's sort of in that range of the human voice. It doesn't, to use, I don't know, what do the Brits say? Get on my tits or something like that. It doesn't, like violin I like violin, but sometimes it just, it irritates me.
It's high up there.
Yeah.
The throatiness of the cello is really appealing, I have to say.
But, I have some other recordings, Isserlis, more romantic works and things. And so I'm always yearning for that vocal quality. And the Britten piece just, although it was interesting, it didn't give me what I really want to hear from Isserlis, what I think he does best, which really make the instruments sing there. So for me, my favorite piece on here was the Merrick. Because,
I liked it too. But I liked the Britten as well. I thought it was really powerful, but nevertheless.
It was interesting, and I tried to follow it along and understand what was going on. And I also appreciated, the exposition of the melodies afterwards to show what the things were built on. Yeah, it was all a good programming like that. But what I like about the cello, I didn't really get until I got to the Merrick. And then I was really satisfied because I thought Isserlis really dug in to those pieces. And I got that, huge fat tone and all the things he can do with, emotional investment. I really think he's a player that really gives his heart to something that has like this real sort of expressive expansiveness to it. And I thought the Merrick had that in it, whereas
it's a really enjoyable piece, the Merrick. I liked it a lot too.
The Britten was an interesting concept, but I just didn't feel like it had enough places for Isserlis to open up with his expressive capabilities. So I liked that. I didn't really think much of the artist thing at the end. I was kind of like,
now that I've given the story about it, it's really just a situational story. Sort of piece. Yeah,
I like the story. And
it's a throwaway piece basically, but it's fun.
Kind of. I like the Gardner and the Waltons too. I just didn't. The Brittens didn't do much for me, but I always like to hear Isserlis. His just tone is just gorgeous. And,
really, he's really majestic.
So
really,
for me, the Merrick was fun. Even though it's a lot of these dance-like movements that it gets a little repetitive, but I don't mind because it's Stephen Isserlis playing cello, and it's really appealing. Yeah, so anything that he plays is just gorgeous in tone. So I can only imagine what it must be like to hear it, just right in front of you.
I've never heard him play live. It's a real shame.
Great,
yeah. I don't know. One day.
Yeah, someday maybe.
I remember I first came across him actually when I was here in Japan. He was on NHK playing John Tavener's The Protecting Veil, which was a new work at the time. It was in the 1990s, and it was on TV, and I was just immediately captivated. He was younger. He was a lot younger then. And I was immediately captivated by his playing and just followed like him ever since. Because I like the piece as well, too,
Yeah, he's got everything in addition to the tone, he's got that expressiveness, and he's also got a bit of aggression in his playing that he can call out, tenderness too. It's all there. So, he's one of the top,
he's one of the best
bands,
living cellists, absolutely, I would say.
Yeah, so interesting recording. Unfortunately, you're going to have to buy it if you want to hear all of it.
You have to buy it,
Hyperion. So if you're a cellist or you really like cello works, it's probably worth adding this to your collection on the Hyperion label.
We'd gladly invite you over to hear it at our places, but I don't think you can get into Japan at the moment.
Yeah, welcome to the Mountain Lair next week for the Christmas episode. We'll throw this on the Luxman and Dolly. I know it's going to sound good on the Dolly Helicones. So,
what, this particular album we're going to play?
Cello on Dolly Helicones.
So I have to bring this over, I guess.
It's so well. You've already shared it with me, so we can do that.
That's right.
But it sounds really warm. I have to keep the Christmas tree away so it doesn't catch on fire.
Oh yeah.
And, it's going to be fun. I'm really looking forward to next week. So.
Oh, it's going to be good. Yeah, we have to get through a week of work first.
Yeah. Anyway, before we get to Christmas, last week we had a organic high.
Organic high. I'm still high from last week's.
That was really good.
It was good.
Anyway, looking at my list, there's still so many things. I'm never going to get to everything.
I'm in the same situation.
That I want to. But the other bulging, like your Christmas stocking, bulging with stuffed things.
What's the French phrase? An embarras de riche. Like an embarrassment of riches. You have too much good stuff,
Too many piano works. And so I thought I'll have to break some of these out. Most of these have come out since summertime. And, there's a good variety and I think really interesting things. So what I put up first here, this is sort of a bridge from the classical world into jazz. So I don't know with our listeners, we don't know about what you like out there. Maybe we have some hardcore classical fans or some jazz fans. Yeah,
listeners, we don't know anything about you. Write to us.
Yeah. Tell us.
Let us know what you want to hear.
Anyway, the reason I picked this, because sometimes this kind of bridge can go terribly wrong, can be a bridge to nowhere and push you into the precipice when you try to, do something like this recording does. But this is like 20 years ago. I had a coworker who was a really hardcore classical fan, and he told me, I don't like jazz because it's sloppy. And,
oh man!
Yeah,
you'll have to tell me who this was after the podcast.
Yeah,
it's like I want to know.
Anyway, so I thought, that's I can't let that sit. So I had a CD at the time. It was the Manhattan Jazz Quintet.
That comment says a lot more about him than it says about jazz. I can tell you that.
Anyway, I think it was Manhattan Jazz Quintet, which is like Lou Soloff and all these monster players in New York. And they had done a disc at that time called The Air on a G String. And it was the jazz versions of all these classical pieces. So I said, here, listen to this. And that one recording really changed his opinion. He said, that was great. Do you have anything else I can listen to? And so that sort of opened up his mind to listening to jazz music. And I had the fortune to learn a bit from a fabulous trumpet player named Howie Shear. And he did a dissertation really on how, you can analyze jazz music basically, the same way you can look at a piece by Bach and see, what the chords are, how the structure relates harmonically, just like any piece of classical music. So there's a lot of, things in jazz that classical listeners, musicians should appreciate too. And sometimes we get musicians who, cross over and bring some classical into jazz or, jazz into classical music. A couple of weeks ago, we were listening to the Polish violinist who is sort of inspiring classical musicians to improvise and, take those liberties. As I think, probably in earlier eras, there was a lot more improvisation in classical music. We know that Bach was an improviser too. Anyway, speaking of Bach, that's where
it all really changed after Beethoven. He was the one who kind of said, okay, you got to do what I say.
My way.
Yeah. So there wasn't any improvisation after that. He didn't even write out his cadenzas.
Yeah, once in a while we get sort of these interesting sort of bridges, and I think this is one that's kind of successful. It's a Spanish pianist who I didn't know before, but I guess he's a well-known pianist in Europe and also a producer, Moisés P. Sánchez. And he's got this recording called Bach Reinventions. And it's on the MarchVivo label. And probably...
The March of Evil?
MarchVivo.
Vivo, okay.
Vivo, yeah, which a label I don't know.
Okay.
But probably all pianists know these works, and other classical people. From what I know, they were written for one of his sons, and then by extension, as a sort of study for musicians and pianists to teach counterpoint and composition. And so there's 15 inventions that sort of show how to have two lines of music working together and where they should go in terms of composition.
In counterpoint, anyway.
In counterpoint, yeah. So you have multiple lines, or two lines of music working together. So Sánchez has seen these as works to inspire further development in terms of improvisation and extension of ideas. And so that's what he's done with these and taken them into the jazz world. And so he's here on piano and also making the arrangements of these. And he's got some interesting compadres here. He's got Pablo Caminero on double bass. That's Pablo 1. And then we've got what to me is a suspicious name, sorry, but Pablo Jones. Actually, they're both, those names don't go together really well, do they? I don't know. They're both Pablo M. So Pablo M. Caminero and Pablo M. Jones, who's on percussion, drums, the interesting sort of tab instrument mbira, and other effects.
Yeah, I was wondering what that was, like a thumb piano I heard in there.
Look it up. They get really big, like desktop size with a huge box that sounds much bigger than it is. Yeah. And it sounds huge on this album. And so he's going to go through these inventions and, see what he can do in terms of improvisation. And it's pretty interesting. So,
I thought so too, yeah.
Yeah. So he starts out. We go right through the list, 1 to 15. There's a lot of them, so I won't stay too long on them. But anyway, the first one starts out with Mbira, and then piano too. It's a very straightforward playing of this, if you know it, and then over sort of like the bass joins in a sort of quarter note and half note bass line that fills in there, and then the piano and bass also exchange the melody. So the counterpoint is often given to the bass throughout all of these pieces. This one, as it said, Jones has Mbira and effects. I'm not quite sure what he's doing for all the effects. There's some washy synth sounds on here in some places. So this one gets a little bit dreamy with kind of echoey, washy effects and some a little bit of piano improvisation too.
When he's playing the theme on the piano too, he's using the pedal here. Yeah. These days, it's kind of been decided that we're going to go back to the sort of period practice, and they kind of keep the notes as short as possible, so they won't use the piano when they play Bach. He'll do that sometimes, but then sometimes he'll take a more romantic approach. So there's a lot of variety on this album.
He mixes it up quite a bit. Some of them are played very straight. Some of them are played actually with very little improvisation at all, just maybe sort of with a little different bent in target. And then some of them are really expanded on. So number 1 is C major, number 2 is C minor. This one starts with a straight piano beginning, and then the bass comes in with a counterpoint line. And I should add that he doesn't move these into sort of a swing beat. Most of them are played with a straight beat, actually almost all of them. And so there's a straight drum beat added on this one too. And then next there's a big modern sort of chord interlude. So number 2 is where he really starts to take off with these.
There's a lot of contrast because he plays it in the notey style that we're familiar with at Bach at the beginning, and then it just suddenly changes.
Then it really launches into this modern jazz, huge, spaced out chords. And then it settles down a bit. Sánchez launches into a really modern solo. He weaves in and out of the harmonies, so he's going outside of the chords, and the beat is really funky and subdivided. And then suddenly he jumps back to the beginning invention melody, and then back to the modern harmony to the end. So it's a really nice creative sandwich. You get a preview of things to come on this one. Invention 3 is D major. This one starts with some kind of drum brush scratching and a really low bass drum beat before the piano comes in. The piano, when it comes in, is joined by a bowed bass on a counter line for the kind of invention exposition, which is nice, another new thing. And we get in this third one. Caminero gets an interlude for a bowing solo, and then he works the upper register, which he kind of gets a really nice glow in his sound. And then Sánchez brings it back, and here he's really chiming out the notes of the melody. And then he gets a kind of cute music box high register ending, while the bass gets some bowed overtones. So he really takes this one out of its element and explores the possibilities. 4 is D minor. You can see the pattern here. You're going major to minor through the keys. This one starts with a blast, and then it lightens up as it moves swiftly through the melody. There's nice bass lines underneath here. It morphs into something modern and takes a slow, funky beat in bass line as it goes. Then it also gets a modal character when he decides to go off and explore the harmonies. And Sánchez explores the harmonies really well in his solo runs. He builds it up with some heavy chords, and then he's back to the invention melody, and then it ends with some interesting combinations of chords. So he's sort of dissecting these and stitching together what he feels is the more interesting sections and ideas as he goes through. Number 5, track 5 is E flat major, invention number 5. He starts with a descending bluesy motif into this one, so this one gets an intro. Then the melody is played by the piano, counterlines in the bass. He takes more liberties here as it repeats and adds some improvisations, and he arrives at this kind of bluesy, funky groove on this one. His solo is
who knew you could pull all of that Bach's lines, Boy.
His solo is rhythmic and bluesy, and he builds it with some dissonant intervals and then these huge repeating chords at the end of the tune. So somehow he finds blues in E flat major Bach, which is pretty cool. Yeah. Then number 6, invention 6 in E major. This starts with an interval sequence opening with piano and bass. There's some percussion effects for atmosphere, and this one sticks mostly to the original melody. It's got a sparser arrangement here, and Sánchez just alters the harmony with new ideas and spots, but this one's pretty much straight forward with the regular invention. Then invention 7, E minor. It's a nice bass and drum counterline to the piano in this one. It's got a lot of things going on, but it ends in just over a minute, and there's no solos. So sort of straightforward here, cut short. Invention 8 is F major. This one gets a lush ballad intro. So here's where he draws out the legato in contrast to, he's using the pedal and things here. And then the invention gets placed into that sort of atmosphere. He starts with the intro. It sounds at home, but there's a lot of movement. Sánchez keeps it legato, and then Caminero has some smooth counter bass lines and a real yearning melodic bass solo here that reaches up in the upper register. This was pretty cool. It comes to a pause after the bass solo, and then Sánchez returns to the legato interpretation of the invention, building it into a pretty improvisation through the high keys on the piano. Caminero adds some high tones and descending interval sequences to a pretty finish. I really like this one a lot. 9, Invention 9 in F minor. This one copies in the same style as 7, with bass and drums working against the piano as the counterpoint. This time they get a kind of hypnotic groove going at the end of the intervention and really heavy drums, and then some electronic effects and synth kind of vocal sounds, those oohs and ahs of the keyboard here. And then it ends with kind of like, I'm not sure what he's using here, but it's almost like a xylophone or high percussion sort of mallet type of thing here. That's a little bit different. Invention 10, G major. This one is played on mbira and bass. No piano here. And but they must have like the microphone almost inside the box for it. So you feel like your head is in the mbira box, and it's very echoey and swoony. Different kind of effect, totally.
This is number 10, right?
Yeah, number 10.
That sounded a bit like a Caribbean steel drum.
That's what I was thinking. Trinidadian steel drums. No, it's not. It's the mbira. And I actually looked it up because I only knew the small versions of it, but there's some recordings you can see on YouTube, a full-size one, and it's amazing the sort of low bass tones that can be drawn out of that. Yeah, it's kind of
had that kind of like tunes kind of sound that the steel drum has.
The low tones get this huge steel drum kind of effect. The timbre is really interesting. 11 is G minor, Invention 11. It starts off like 9 and 7, but Sánchez takes some more liberties here. After a pause, after the main melody, he gets a riff going. Then he uses the harmonic progression to launch into a piano exploration, and he goes on his own in some interesting directions. Then he sets the ending down kind of softly. 12 is in A major. This one starts with a bowed bass solo intro, which is nice after kind of following the same pattern. And he gets some interesting pitch slides in here that you weren't expecting Bach.
He also got kind of an unusual, sad sort of sound, too, which I don't really associate with Bach. So it's kind of interesting to hear in this context.
Sánchez and Jones join in with the melody, and compared to the bass, then they play the melody really daintily here. It's sort of just danced out here. Caminero works a counterline between the piano phrases, and Sánchez gets creative with some chimey chords at the end. Invention 13 is A minor. It's not too fast on this one. Some of the previous ones are really, they just launching out of the gate with speed on them. This one's played very straight at the start. Jones just adds some light clicks for rhythm here. It pauses on an unresolved chord, and then Jones builds up a unique beat with a soft hits over kind of a bigger bass drum. And then Sánchez and Caminero come back in with a real jazzy and bluesy new idea that it sort of ends just as it was picking up steam. I wanted to see where they would go with this. This is one of the more jazzy interpretations, but it doesn't last long. Then we've got Invention 14 in B flat major. This is slow and legato over a soft rock beat. Sánchez sticks close to the original melody, but Caminero has a bass solo where he finds some really cool bluesy ideas to fit over the harmonies. The harmonies are straight on, but he somehow mines the blues out of this, and it ends up really sounding like a cool pop song. So you can really see in this tune how, Bach's codification of the harmonic ideas just carries into the modern era right through pop and jazz music.
Yeah, when I hear like, especially like the bass player, when they can pull these sort of ideas out of this music that I kind of think of in a certain way, it makes me feel like anything is possible.
Yeah.
So there's something really liberating about hearing this album. Mm-hmm. I generally like Bach in a jazz idiom anyway. But this was really kind of it really went off a little bit too.
All those 2-5-1s, they just go through there. And then the final invention, 15, is B minor. This one has some syncopated space chord intro before the melody. Caminero is synced with Sanchez's left hand on this one. In most of the tracks, the bass is sort of not working with the piano. The bass is often the counterpoint to the piano, and whereas Sánchez will be using the left hand for harmony. But here, the bass and the left hand are locked in, which you'll notice as a difference. They return to the intro chord idea, and they use it to launch into a really interesting rhythm section kind of idea for Sánchez to solo on. And then the album ends going back to Invention 1 in C major, but they do something different. It has really sparse notes and chording intro with some very dreamy effects.
I said new agey.
New age. It's a bit new agey, yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, though. New age gets like...
As long as it's only one track. He stops and starts
it's got its place, new age
the motion with pauses that give sort of melody fragments and new ideas, but it doesn't get momentum. And the final section gets some weighty low piano chords. Sánchez tinkles out some high note improvisations to finish it. It's a very atmospheric take. But all in all, it's an interesting project, and he finds inspiration in these Bach works. There's a lot of variety. He has great technique. He knows his Bach well. He knows how these are supposed to work with the counterpoints. He has some really cool jazz ideas, exploring harmonies. I think it's worth a listen, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's more than worth a listen. I think it's worth kind of having, maybe. I don't know that I'll pick this one up, but I did enjoy it a lot. It's very inventive with the inventions. It's just the ideas that they pulled out of this and were able to develop from the material were just always surprising for me. Like I said, it kind of set my brain free in a way to hear this. I think I hope classical listeners listen to the jazz section of this podcast, because they really should hear this album. I thought it was really, to coin a new term, inventive.
I think Bach would be pleased with this. It reminds me of that story where Stravinsky was in New York, and he went into, I don't know what club it was at the time, but Charlie Parker was playing, and Charlie Parker was a big fan of Stravinsky's music, and he supposedly saw Stravinsky walk in. And in the middle of whatever tune he was playing, he just fit in a quote from The Rite of Spring. And Stravinsky was so excited that he stood up and knocked the table over and spilled his whiskey or something. So it was sort of like two geniuses from different idioms who, were appreciating each other. And there's no reason why that can't happen at any time. And I think Sánchez does he does something like that here. It's good fun for classical and jazz fans alike. So check it out. And I want to check out some of his other things, because it's a new pianist for me.
I thought this was really interesting. So I might have to check some of that out too.
Yeah. All right. On to a completely different type of pianist. Very original, and another. I actually really like all of these recordings this week. And this is Anthony Wonsey. On the Cellar Live label with an album called Lorraine's Lullabye. And so we've got Wonsey on piano, Dmitry Kolesnik on bass for most of the album. On two tracks, another bassist, Brandy Disterheft, tracks 8 and 10. On drum, Chris Beck. Trumpet, Antoine Dry. There's only two tracks, 8 and 9. Sax, tenor sax, that is, Zet Harris. And one track, we've got vocals, Milton Suggs. And this album is produced by Jeremy Pelt, the great jazz trumpet player. And how it progresses is that it starts out with actually a solo piano, and then it gets just bass. Track 2 is duo. Then we get jazz trio for a while. We add the horns in, and finally we end with vocal. So it's sort of a nice sort of layering approach going through it. And the material is covering a nice mixture too. We've got a few standards, not necessarily done in the standard way. Of course, we've got some Wonsey originals, but also Kolesnik contributes a few tunes. He's an excellent writer as well. So let's go through what we've got here. We start with Sweet Lorraine. You may associate this tune with Bud Powell, who did amazing things with it. It's a kind of standard tune by Cliff Burwell and Mitchell Parrish. This is just solo piano. Wonsey gets to the melody after a brief intro. He plays rubato, adding nice runs and chord movement between the phrases. He breaks into a swing for a bit, which he'll do again, but then he pulls it back out of the tempo to work on these more rubato ideas that he has going. And he also adds some bluesy phrases in his improvisations. When he comes back to the rubato, he's able to add some of these big chord clusters, which when he's in the swing, he's doing this kind of almost stride-like thing. But I think he wants to do more color painting here because that's the kind of player that he is. And he works up to a nicely embellished ending. His hands are sort of chasing each other up on a run where they're almost catching up with each other, and he sets the ending down gently. So we get a solo track intro. Number 2 is an original by the bassist Dmitry Kolesnik. It's called Giving Rise to Doubt. This is a really pretty rubato piano intro. Kolesnik joins in with a pulsing bass line. The melody is very pretty. Kolesnik's a really nice composer on the 2 tunes he contributes on this album. It's a kind of melancholy, really rich chords. And Kolesnik gets a solo for himself, starting things out. He's got a very fat tone, nice bass sound. Wonsey's solo lines roll on. Sometimes it seems as if they would stop, like it's as if his fingers are under weighted tension. This is the feel I get for his piano style. He has this relaxed approach that even when he's playing fast lines, as he does on the pretty phrases at the end of this tune here, it's as if there's this tension holding him back. It's almost like this, I don't know how to describe it. It's as if he has like rubber bands pulling back on his fingers. So it gets this really lovely hesitation in the way that he plays. So there's always sort of like I feel like there's a rhythmic cocking. Almost
like like the notes are slightly late. You're saying?
No, it's not even that. It's just, it's like they're weighted with the tension of a hammer pulled back on a revolver or something, and it just gives a kind of spring, but never sort of a rushing feeling. Even when he's playing fast, to me it feels like he's being effortless doing it, and he could be playing. It's like, I'm playing this, but I could do even less. And that, I think that's sort of the appeal to his style, I feel, in a sort of, there's so many great pianists out there, but I felt like his rhythmic approach is kind of unique throughout all of these things. Yeah,
the thing I got from this, he seems to like, there's a lot of intellect in his playing.
Yes.
He seems to know all of the styles of jazz piano through the years, and he manages to get a bunch of them into every track. It's really amazing. He'll just kind of go from one style to the next. This particular track is kind of, I said it proceeds almost like a classical work, because it just feels like it has a shape, it has like an architecture to it, that was sort of pre-thought out. So it was kind of
it's a nice composition. I'm surprised. Kolesnik here is a good composer. So this is a very attractive original work here. And then we'll go back to another standard for track 3, the Richard Rodgers, I Didn't Know What Time It Was. But you've never heard it like this before, because it starts out with a really funky piano introduction, and it doesn't swing. It gets a pulsing R&B beat. Right from the bass and drum working together, and it's got a rim shot in the beat. So You get that, it's like, whoa. I think that's a play. I think he's playing on time. I didn't know what time it was because the time in this moves around a lot. And what's cool is in the middle of the melody, in the head and then in the solos, they also turn back into swing for just a few bars.
Yeah.
And then it comes out of that. So they do that. And then after they do that, they also will return to the funky riff that's established in the beginning. And so they do that after the melody. They hit that riff. Kolesnik gets a bass solo first. Again, nice melodic bass playing, also with a good funkiness to it. The riff and melody return again, and then they launch it into a fast gospel-y beat. So now it was funky before, but now it's like frantic, and hallelujah. Wonsey solos over that. Beck really lays it down heavy on the drums on this one. And it's interesting, in the recording, the drums are panned hard right, and it's almost as if the drummer is beating in the head here. It's kind of cool, but it is really heavy. And Wonsey works up a revival frenzy of rhythmic chords, bluesy lines. They bring it back down to the slow, funky intro to end it. And so you may not know what time signature or rhythm it's going on, but it's good fun here. Track 4, another Kolesnik original, another really pretty attractive tune called Little Mouse. I guess it's better than a Big Mouse. I don't know.
No.
It's a pretty piano intro.
Have you ever seen a big mouse? I don't know. I guess a big for a mouse. I don't know.
No, I did see a large, almost cat-sized rat in the Sanjo arcade when I was cycling home from a night of drinking years ago.
Oh, boy. I think those days are changed recently, yeah. They may be behind Kyoto, too. We'll have to see.
It could be. Anyway, this one gets a piano intro for more than a minute, which is not the only one we'll hear on this album. Wonsey likes to work into things, I should say. And after you think it's going to be this big lush thing, it turns out to not be it's not a ballad after all, but it's a medium swing. Beck adds some nice tight brushwork on the snare here. Wonsey gets a swinging solo, and he punctuates it with these left-hand chords that push his lines along. Kolesnik also has a solo. It's short, but it's really meaty. Like it's got some, good chops on it, I should say, and it has a good bounce to it. And then Wonsey comes back and he trades fours, gives Beck some time to beat the skins a bit before they hit the final melody. Nice composition. I really like Kolesnik as a composer here. I want to check out some of his own stuff. Track 5, Blues for Hiroshi. And I guess Hiroshi is a club owner in Tokyo who has often had Wonsey play series of performances over the years. And so he wrote this for him. This one is interesting tune. The left-hand piano introduces a bass line. It's got an unexpected chord in there that starts the intro, and then it goes into this section that's a real even beat place, and Beck gets some real intense cymbal thrashing in that part. But
he's a pretty present drummer, you know. You're always really aware of him, you know.
But the main tune is actually in swing. It swings. And so after they go out of this sort of even beat, intense interlude section, it goes into the swinging. But they get back to that injection of the even beat pattern now and then in the melody and the solos, just for fun. So it's one of these tunes where the rhythm changes up now and then you get that even beat change and thrashing. Wonsey and Kolesnik get solos, and then Wonsey trades with Beck again before a repeat of the melody. It's a fun original tune. I imagine Hiroshi was happy with a cool tune written for him. This would be a good one. I'd be
happy
live
with any tune written from you, really.
Yeah, this would be a good one to hear live in your own club. Yeah. Track 6, a standard, more Richard Rodgers here. It's from the film State Fair, a really usually a lovely kind of ballad tune, one of the great spring tunes. It might as well be spring. But here, they're going to do it a little bit differently. There's a lush piano intro into the melody. Wonsey makes some interesting reharmonizations. Beck plays lightly, and then as he's building up the drum, you realize that it gets a bossa type beat. So they're not swinging this. It's straight beat. I say bossa-like because it doesn't get the kind of accented places that bossa usually gets, but it's even beat in nature. Kolesnik has another rhythmic solo here. Wonsey goes from lush to more intense chiming phrases, and it's a nice, fresh reimagining of this standard. They're not just playing down, this tune that we often hear jazz musicians play. No, this gets a kind of at least a rhythmically reinvention in an almost bossa type thing, but it's not really like that. So I like this one a lot. Now we're going to shift gears a bit. 7, Blacker Black's Revenge, a Wonsey original. The remaining tunes are all his original ones. This one starts with intense piano chords.
Yeah, it certainly does. Yeah, hammering piano chords.
Just hammering out. And these really fast, angular, you can call it melody. It's not very melodic, but it's this kind of post-bop kind of style tune. It's got lots of breaks and changes. You don't want to be in the band and doze off when you play this tune because there's a lot going on. You listen to Kolesnik's bass playing here. He's got to really keep changing things up between doing these stopping rhythms and fast lines. And
I wrote that his bass pattern is a quasi solo.
Yeah,
it's almost like soloing.
Doing so much that he's really exposed here. Once he gets through all the obstacles, this is basically an obstacle course of a head of a tune because there's so much going on. It's really fun and cool. When it gets going, it gets into a real driving beat because the tempo's fast. And Wonsey's intense here. He's cranked up in comparison to the previous tracks. And so his solo is very inspired here. After they repeat the melody again, then they hammer on the repeated chord for a while. So Beck thrashes out a little bit, but then he doesn't get too much space. And then they get to the end there. So very cool original tune. It's difficult enough just to play what Wonsey wrote on this one. So you don't want to doze off on that. 8, another Wonsey original, Avo's Blues, Blooze. It's kind of like blues and booze together. I like that word. Yeah.
I do like it. Yeah. I like it myself.
Here we get switch out for a different bass player, Brandy Disterheft. And the horns come in on this tune, and it's kind of an upbeat swinging tune. Zet Harris on tenor sax solos first, and then Antoine Dry on trumpet, and then finally Wonsey on piano. It's a nice change to have the horns in here, and kind of a feel-good tune. Number 9, another Wonsey original, Do You Remember Me? Dramatic piano intro here, pretty runs and lots of chord movement. The intro here, like the other ones, lasts more than a minute, so he's not in any hurry to get in, but that's nice. He gets some nice ideas in. After a pause, the bass and drums are in, and this one gets off to a chugging swing. The horn lines snake over the chords with spots for horn solo phrases, and then the horns trade off solo lines, kind of conversing with each other. Wonsey gets a solo next, and the horns come in to back him, and the snaking lines continue as he works up to more and more intense lines to the end. So I like this sort of idea, rather than just having, melody, solo, 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 and then repeat the melody. There's a constant interplay in this tune, keeping the horns working and listening to each other, and then they build off the piano solo too. So a little different approach to getting the players working in with their solos. And then we get the last tune, the vocal, another Wonsey original, Melancholy Mind, piano and a Harmon muted trumpet on the intro to this are joined by the bass and drums. And this gets kind of a light bossa nova type groove to it. You wouldn't think it's bossa nova, but if you listen to it, you'll hear that it's even beat. It's not swingy. And here we've got Milton Suggs on the vocal. The melody that Wonsey's written here is kind of a dreamy type of melody, and Suggs floats it nicely over the interesting harmonies. There's a lot of interesting sort of tensions and close tones and movements in the harmonies, and the melody works nice placed on that. He works up the intensity to a nice climax, but then he brings it down and he stays on. The horns come in after the main melody's over, and he stays on with backing lines with the horns. At that point, Wonsey brings in his solo, and Suggs keeps singing over that with phrases with the melody right to the end. So the piano and the vocals just keep on going, and it sort of fades out as it gets to the end. So it's kind of a nice, kind of dreamy, soulful close to an album that has a lot of variety to it already.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I like Wonsey's approach. He's got a very unique sort of way that he plays piano. He's not a show-off. Even when he plays fast, it's with a lot of restraint, but he sort of minds the kind of harmonic richness in his playing. His left hand is always doing interesting things, too. Very interesting rhythms. The program material here is nice. We've got standards, but done in an interesting way. Wonsey's original tunes are cool. Kolesnik's compositions are really pretty. And then the way the album is built, it's building layers with the instruments as we go through to the end. They're a really good album.
Yeah, I said busy, complicated, intellectual, yet appealing. I don't know how you how that happens. The effect is dizzying, but not off-putting. It's hard to put a finger on the essence of the ideas as they keep being pulled away from you before you can really kind of get to know them. So this pianist, Wonsey, he's a monster. He's got a lot of like knowledge and great technique, and he won my respect. I don't think this is really a pianist you love as much as you respect, but nevertheless, it's an appealing record. I don't know that I shouldn't say it'll take work. It doesn't. They give you the ideas, but it's hard to really get a grasp on what's happening. Maybe that's a good thing too. I don't know.
I think I listened to this like 4 times this week.
Wow.
And, and it took that many times to get into like...
Yeah, I could imagine. Yeah, I was kind of like, wow, there's a lot going on.
Yeah. And I like to do that because I hate to get analytical on a first listen. Like if I've got something I've got to listen to, I don't want to just sit down and like, okay, what's going on? I'd really like to had it gone on and just like sort of spoke to me. Pulled me into it and say, oh, that was cool. And so I say, I'm going to be ready for that the next time I listen to it. And that's kind of how I approached to this one. And so I'd listen to it throughout the week, just, sort of doing something else or then late at night. And only today did I finally come back with those memories in mind. And I think it's that kind of recording. It'll reward repeated listenings.
Absolutely.
Especially what's good about this is...
it's a record that invites repeated listeners. She's like, I didn't get all that, kind of.
And there's a lot invested here in terms of composition and arrangement and then programming. So, he's thought this out. We've got standards done in a unique way, these nice originals, and then the layering of instruments, finally adding vocals. And, I'm kind of interested in how he decided to write a vocal track and put it on. But
at the very end, it was kind of odd. Yeah,
but I like it.
There were a few surprises though. The brass came in right at the end. You didn't really think that would happen.
Yeah. So interesting. Anyway, if you don't know Wonsey's piano playing, definitely a player you want to check out. You'll like this album, I think. And finally, the new album from a pianist we both know and like.
And love, really. We like a lot. Yeah.
And this is even, something different here. Bill Charlap with his new album, switching over to Blue Note. I think he was on High Note before with a few of his CDs that I have.
I guess Don was listening.
Yeah. But Street of Dreams. And so we've got Bill Charlap on piano and Peter Washington on bass and no relation Kenny Washington on drums. Here as his long-standing trio that he's worked with. And now, this one is an album you've got to get into a very different sort of frame of mind to appreciate. And what I mean by that, most of this is extremely slow tempo work.
Yeah.
However, rather than, being lethargic or uninteresting, you have to understand what Charlap is capable of on piano. Now, he really swings when he plays, and he can, do, standard swinging along or fast playing. But I think he's exploring a different aspect of his capabilities here. And by slowing things down or focusing on these slow tempo numbers, he's sort of opening up. When I listen to this, I get a sort of 3D depth into the music where using the slow tempos almost allows him to take the tempo out of the equation of what he wants to do. So, it's kind of, it's really hard. These are one of these hard musical things to explain. But right. When, John Coltrane on saxophone played these blazing lines that, I know you hate this term, but they called it the sheets of sound.
The sheets of sound, yeah. Because I just don't like the image. I don't know.
So what he's doing is giving you these complex harmonic images by the scales that he's running through at a blazing speed, so that you can actually outline the chords, in your brain from these lines that he's giving you in sheets. This is sort of the opposite. This is sort of like slowing down the tempo so much that there's so much space that the harmonies almost sort of come out to you not in sheets, but sort of in depth textures. That's the best I can explain to the effect I got from what Charlap is doing here.
Wow.
And
sounds heavy.
Yeah, well, it's beautifully heavy.
I thought of it as a light kind of album, though. It's not light that it didn't have content, but I mean light that it wasn't like really kind of pushing my intellect in order to understand it or anything. But I guess it could.
I think if you keep listening to this, and it's going to sort of come out to you, that extra space that's sort of, there's always space in the notes, and the great players use space between their lines. If you listen to, if you listen like Chet Baker, these players who have just this kind of great phrasing, and they always leave enough space. They never play more than they need to. And Charlap has given himself, I feel like, an extra space to work in with the tempos that he takes on this album. And then he just jumps into those, and you're always waiting for something to kind of come out of this, bubbling cauldron of kind of sounds. So anyway, that's how I describe this whole thing. And so Charlap is not a composer, and he's, pretty straightforward with that when he describes his style. He's an interpreter of songs, so we're not going to get any original things here, but we do get some great mining of classic tunes, which begin with The Duke, a Dave Brubeck tune. And this one has very evenly spaced piano chords in the intro. It gets into a relaxed swing as the bass and drums join in. Charlap tinkles out spaced out notes before he gets around to the famous melody as played. You may know this. Miles Davis played this. A lot of people have covered this tune. He nicely accents the melody and part of his style is sort of peppering these really low notes in the left hand. Boom! He just hit these kind of things that jar you. And he does that throughout most of his recordings. He leaves tons of space between the phrases, shows a nice sense of touch and swing. There's a mix of lyrical lines, percussive left-hand chords. It's very tasty overall. Peter Washington's bass tone is really fat underneath, and Kenny Washington keeps perfect time. Nice cymbal technique. He never plays too much. He's a subtle drummer, so it's a nice start to the recording.
Yeah, the opening kind of reminded me a bit of Debussy's. Yes, those wide kind of chords, and then like you had said, Charlap does. The melody emerges from the direction of the chords, like the chords are kind of moving like in a certain direction, and then the melody just kind of is moving in the same direction. Sort of, it was really a beautiful effect. I liked it a lot.
Yeah,
I was really struck by that.
Yeah, it's nice. It's time to develop that. Next, we're going to get a tune, Strayhorn, Ellington, and also La Touche, Daydream. You probably know this melody. It gets a rubato piano introduction, a very, very slow ballad tempo. Kenny Washington's brushing delicately with some very sustained, soft sounds. It's almost amazing he can keep that sort of shushing going for so long. Charlap fills in the melody gaps with very pretty, closely voiced chords in between his lines. And they're sometimes rolled chords. Peter Washington gives the pulse of the movement below on the bass. Charlap is really great at a tempo like this. This is what I think this whole album is about, this space to work with. He plays with subtlety and taste, but he mixes fluid lines, curling fast runs, and he also masterfully manipulates the dynamics here. There's some things that are so soft. It's like, did he really play that? And then there's some really chiming notes where he pulls out, the tone from the piano. There's a little spot where Kenny Washington, he gets kind of inspired. Maybe they thought it was going to take off, and the brushing goes into double timing just for a little bit. And you think, it's going to take off. No, and then it sort of goes back to where it was. And there's an interesting false ending chord. You'll think it's over, but it's not. And then you get the final chord. So this is where some of the beauty of space comes in here. Number 3, Lerner and Lane tune, You're All the World to Me. Another rubato piano intro. It hints at a faster tempo to come. The drums and bass come in kind of incrementally with gaps before the rhythm gets up to its final chugging speed. There's tight hi-hat and snare hits that give a bounce for Charlap to swing over. He swings his melodies here. And listen to what his left hand is doing underneath. Not just chords under his playing. There's these occasionally jarring low note stabs and other things going on. He trades fours with the drums for a chorus before he comes back to the melody. And the ending has some nice spaces for more fleeting lines before the final chord. So another really tasty use of time on this tune. Track 4, I'll Know by Frank Loesser. We got a piano chord intro here. The left hand starts with a repeating note pulse. Charlap lays out the melody gently. There's some syncopated lines where the bass and drums kick it forward here, but they drop out, and then Charlap gets more extra space alone before he joins in again on the melody repeat. It's a nice effect to sort of building up the tune. Charlap solos close to the melody here with just pretty embellishments rather than deviating or going off onto more exploratory things. But it's more than enough with the sparseness that it's done here. And Peter Washington here gets some really nice, subtle, and lovely bass bowing near the end. You might almost miss it because the volume is so low, but it just adds that nice touch to the subtlety. Track 5.
But I want to say something about the end of this. At the end, he pauses right before the resolution. There's like a long pause, and you're guessing, you're thinking, oh, is this going to be a false cadence or is this going to be the end of the song? You don't really know,
right?
And then you find out he plays this single note as the end of the piece, and so you don't know if it could. I mean, it could continue from that, but that winds up being the end of the piece, so it doesn't really resolve. But in your mind, I guess, because it ends, it goes on to the next piece. It does. It was a really sort of I can't think of the word to say. It was it's really uninterpretable by the listener what he really means by that, because he doesn't give you enough. Yes, it's mysterious. Let's say maybe that's
mysterious.
The word I want.
Yeah. It's draws you into it for sure. Track 5, Kenny Burrell, the great guitarist's tune, Your Host. This gets a mid-tempo swinging melody. It's got a nice bouncing bass line, little gaps for Charlap to fill in here. Kenny Washington's fills and hits are varied and tasty on this tune. Charlap's solo is also tasty and very swinging. And here again, listen to both hands. The left hand gives these sort of rhythmic kicks to what he's doing in the right hand. He's sort of like almost like kicking himself along with the left hand accompaniment, which is fun to listen to. The melody at the end alternates with unexpected chords for a nice touch, and it finishes with some very complicated cascades of notes, which are really pretty. Track 6, another standard out of nowhere, Johnny Green, Edward Hyman composition. This one, no intro, comes straight out with the melody at a medium swing here. There's a little break into a melodic bass solo. Washington's sound is deep, but he has a very soft attack, almost no string slap in his tone. It's a very pure kind of sound. I thought his style in his technique is kind of unique. You know, a lot of bass players get that... You get that sound. There's not much of that in his sound. It's this rounded bass tone. Charlap's solo is playful. Gets some crashing left-hand notes in and some interesting descending figures. Trades off eighths with Kenny for some tasty drummings. And at the end, some nice substituted chords that we're not used to with this melody. And nice treatment for a standard, Track 7, what are you doing for the rest of your life? I think we're making podcasts, but
that's going to be it from here on.
Yeah.
Although you never know. Life
we're
takes
not
some
traveling,
changes.
that's for sure. Michele Legrand, Alan Bergman, a long rubato melody intro creates a yearning for something, and then the bass and drums join in delicately. It's very slow. Again, this is this 3D magic for Charlap here. Paints all these pretty ideas. Peter Washington, again, a nice, lovely bass tone in the descending lines. The drums and bass drop out again once it gets going. That's kind of cool. Charlap floats a while before he returns. He's even more delicate and sparse in his solo here. I feel this track is like that most mining of the space. He creates lots of expectations between his soft lines and trilling figures. When he returns to the melody once more, he's solo again. They drop out, give him all that space until the final note, which they let just ring out forever. And wow, this is some really subtle beauty.
He achieved some real poignancy here. This really kind of came out as, like, I think, the emotional. Yeah, you can't really say high point, but the emotional subtle point of the album. Mm-hmm. There's like something in there. And it's really poignant. It's kind of it kind of touches you kind of gently. It's really nice. Yeah. This is what you do in the rest of your life. Yeah. As I
said, I feel like it's just like pulling the tune into 3D space, and you just can dive in, and just like with these kind of YouTube 3D type of videos, if you've seen this, you can look in all directions. You almost feel like you have that amount of space in here to like look around with your ears as to what's going on, because the tempo is not hurrying you along.
I wonder what his concept was going into this. I'd be curious to know. I don't know, because we're interpreting, of course, but I don't know.
Yeah, anyway. I think it takes a player with a real sort of maturity, and then I think it's a concept. I really think it must be a conscious concept to slow things down enough that you can pull these things out. But and
to get your trio mates to agree to go for
these guys have been playing together for a long time, so
they're probably all on the same page.
Then again, I could be wrong, right? Anyway, we get the title track, number 8, Street of Dreams, Victor Young and Samuel M. Lewis composition. Piano intro, left-hand note that playfully sneaks in among the melody notes. When the bass and drums come in, the tempo is very slow again, but by this point you won't mind at all. Charlap again uses lots of space, focuses on dynamics. His left hand can be imperceptibly soft, but then have an unexpected accent at any moment. He builds it up a bit. Kenny Washington adds a bit of click to the rhythm once it gets going, and it gets quiet, ending with a final jolt. So my comments finally, when I listened to this a number of times, I said it's a tasty and reserved playing at the highest level by players who are more than listening to each other. They're sort of breathing together. I mean, Charlap can swing hard when he wants to, but here the focus is on creating a 3D space through slow tempo numbers. You need repeated listenings to get all of the sweet drops of cookie dough left in the bowl from this album.
That's pretty good.
That's how I described it. Yeah.
I listened to this several times myself. I think I heard it like 4 times. Like, I heard it before this week, though. I had already started listening to it, but it kept drawing me back. And I think I did like, what you said, the space. And they're just these moments, too. I think when you have a lot of space like that, you're focusing on what's happening in that moment and what he's going to do. One thing I noticed also on Street of Dreams, the very last track of the album, this was even sparser playing by Charlap than on the rest of the album, in an album that's already got a lot of space on it. I thought it was all pretty, it was bold in an understated way.
Right, exactly. That's the whole point.
It's one of those, those contrasting, contradictory type things. But I really enjoyed this album a lot. I mean, it's something that I listen to often, and I'm going to continue to listen to. Yeah. So I highly recommend it to everybody out there.
Yeah, I mean, I play piano poorly, just as, something.
Well, so do I now. I don't play
to work out. I've always used it as something to work out, musical problems for my other instruments, and to be visual, musical sort of device for composition and things. But the possibilities with piano are endless in terms of what can be done with it in styles and
we're still going
ideas. And so here this great sort of example of that, 3 pianists all with masterful technique, all trying completely different ideas on these new recordings. You're going back to Bach, but it's made new. You got Wonsey's style, who, I mean, what I like is he's got a lot of reserve in his approach too. Even when he's playing fast, it's almost as if there's something pulling him back from it, and I like that kind of thing. And then we've got Charlap's approach, which is just sort of like I almost feel like I'm looking inside the time on this recording, and he's getting in there, and they're all really great and interesting.
I think I'm going to put this on after the podcast ends. I'm kind of interested. I want to hear it again.
Releases of different character, different ways to approach time, really. And there's all kinds of harmonic things going on. Nice different kind of compositions and things. So, a really fulfilling piano selection going on here.
Excellent choices, I thought.
Yeah, thank you.
So another enjoyable week. This really made listening to all these albums just made this year so worthwhile, despite all the lunacy around COVID going on. I almost didn't even notice it with all this.
Yeah, who cares?
Yeah. Who cares?
Who cares what all those people with masks outside are doing? We're inside listening to this stuff.
What are you going to do? Lock me in? Okay.
Yeah. All right. Don't take my streaming away.
Don't take my streaming away. Right. Exactly. Otherwise,
so what is this? 40 episodes, 6 albums. What's that? 240 albums? That's pretty good.
We've heard 240 albums this year. That's amazing.
And
wow.
We're not done yet.
Well, minus 4, because on the first episode we only heard 2 albums.
Yeah.
So
I think we got. Well, you had. Technically,
the first more than that, because we had a few 4
albums this year.
Yeah, we had a few 4 album shows. For me. Yeah.
Not bad.
Around 240 albums. I think we can safely say 250.
Yeah, 250.
Yeah,
that's not bad. We're benching 250.
I think that's an excellent year.
Was that? Yeah. That was another Jerky Boys one, was it? You do the bench work? Yeah, I'm benching 250. Yeah. 250 pieces? No, 250 albums. That's not bad. I mean, to actually, listen to in detail that many albums, that was, it's been a good project. And for any of the listeners who have been there,
it's good for the mind too. As everybody around you goes insane, you can just kind of chill out.
Yeah,
listen to music. It's good for you. And not only that, it'll expand your mind. They used to say that in the '60s, but it's true. You kind of The music has some good qualities that it puts onto the brain. It was Robert Greenberg had mentioned that music. Listening to complicated music like classical and jazz, or really any kind of classical world music, will help you think outside the box more effectively, because it's not really linear. It kind of affects the brain that way.
Yeah,
I think that's really interesting. I think we need a lot more thinking outside the box in the world right now. So listen to these works, and even some, if you're listening in India, listen to some of your native classical music. I mean, it's good for your brain.
Yeah, I think, getting into these different dimensions of how we experience the world is one of the things about music that's really nice, because, of course, music follows in time. That's the thing that makes it different from other sort of art forms, a picture that you can...
Yeah, everything else is in space.
Appreciate completely in space, right? Yeah. But so we're forced to go through time...
which is a hard thing to grasp.
It's a hard thing to do, and it requires memory and attention and things. But at some point, like I felt in this Charlap, or I should say Charlap, it's not pronounced.
It is Charlap, really?
Charlap,
I was wondering about that. Okay.
Yeah, so finally I say it correctly.
Okay.
But he opens up this sort of 3 dimensions. So we're in time, but I feel like I get another dimension that's opened up through that. And those kind of things can happen. And I think that's the sort of takeaway to regular life. As you're going along, in your daily mundane tasks or interactions with people, because when you're listening to this sort of medium of sound that just travels along linear, it sort of opens up these sort of, like new windows. And, you get these pop-ups when you're browsing the internet. In music, you get these sort of pop-ups and things that come out.
And they're not annoying.
No, they're not. Yeah, they're not annoying. But that can happen.
They're the opposite of annoying.
That can happen in real life as you're experiencing these linear time things.
Yeah.
That you sort of tune out just to get through the mundane kind of nature of things. But it sort of heightens your awareness of things that carry over into everyday life. I think that's a carryover, a takeaway of broadening the mind from listening to music. And and we've had a lot of that, and I think we're going to build on that going forward. So
well, I think we should end this podcast right about here before we get too philosophical.
Yeah. And lest we
I think we already did, but
lest we have waxed too philosophical, next week we'll break out the eggnog, steaks, sausages, and drinks, and get a little festive with a little lighter material for Christmas episode.
Well, I don't know about light, but at least not in the classic. Some of it will be light.
Some of it will be lighter. Yeah. Well,
Well, it's not going to be heavy like the Benjamin Britten piece, but
it'll be lighter and fun. I think
it's not going to be no meditations on death for Christmas. Okay,
yeah, I hope not. Anyway, yeah,
it's just not the right time. That's for Lent.
That's for Lent. Yeah. We'll crucify you in the spring, but for now we will have a feast of joy.
Yes.
So this has been episode 40 of Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. And as we said at the beginning, please do like, subscribe. If you enjoyed the podcast, send us a comment at adultmusicpodcast, all one word, at gmail.com. Next week, episode 41 will feature new holiday favorites, all new releases in classical and jazz.
Yeah, mostly from this year. There's going to be one from last December,
the one that didn't make it in time. That's a big,
the one that didn't make it in time.
That's a big failure when your Christmas album doesn't make it in time.
Yeah.
But, I guess that's why some of them released them like a bit too early.
They should release them in October, really.
Yeah,
but,
really.
Some of them get released in December. You know, what's the point of that? You're not going to hear it in time.
Anyway, I think next week will be the sweet spot. Still 2 weeks to Christmas, but not too early so that you'll get sick of it and go humbug on us too early. So.
No, we got 3 weeks to Christmas. Yeah.
So it'd be just in time. Yeah. You can still
by the way, one more thing. We are recording on December 5th. Today, the day we're recording, is the 230th anniversary of Mozart's death. He died in December 5th, 1791. So,
rest in peace.
Rest in peace. I'm sure he is. He's still remembered.
Yeah, too bad he can't get those royalties, but anyway. All right, folks, we'll see you again next week. So stay tuned for the holiday festivities.